Chapter 3673. The family of Wang Ba Heishinjiu was desperate. She took out a piece of eggshell and said, "Let us out now. Otherwise you won't have a chance to be reborn." Unfortunately, there was no reaction. At that moment, the big rocks on the roof of the hall started to fall. If Heishinjiu had not released her spiritual energy barrier, she would have been smashed into a meat patty. The guy had no choice but to tell Mao Qiu, "Ask Xiao Jingjing to take me in. When the collapse is over, ask Xiao He to dig a hole out." Then Heishinjiu heard the news that shocked her. "Master, Xiao Jingjing said that you used too much power of lightning before, so she can't take you in for the time being." Heishinjiu. At this moment, her heart felt like it was being cursed by a dog. She had never expected such an ending. If she had known this would happen, she would not have touched the last 10,000-year-old mysterious iron chain. Now, it was obviously useless to regret or complain about the Great Void Mirror. The most important thing was to find a way to leave this place. Just as Heishinjiu was having a hard time, she heard the voice of the little black bird through her spiritual sense. "Master, Curly Hair said that the little bastard has a way to bring us out of here." The reason why the nightmare beast did not tell Yun Chujiu directly was that it was not Yun Chujiu's contracted beast, so it could not communicate with her through spiritual sense. The reason why Meng Yanshou did not tell Yun Chujiu directly was because it was not Yun Chujiu's contracted beast. At this moment, Yun Chujiu could not care less about the strangeness of this sentence. If the little bastard had a way to leave, the little bastard could have just told her himself. Why did the nightmare beast have to say it through Xiao Hei's mouth? She immediately let the little bastard out. The little bastard looked confused and aggrieved. "Master, I have no choice. Curly Hair is talking nonsense." Heishinjiu was also desperate. She said fiercely, "Black Tortoise is a bastard, and you are a bastard too. Besides, maybe you are related to Black Tortoise. Maybe you can. Hurry up and try, or we will really be buried alive." The little bastard was about to cry. How could it know how to get out? In desperation, it took out the thumb-sized turtle shell that Heishinjiu had given it, and started to make seals with its claws according to the chant it had used to use its mother's turtle shell. However, there was no response. Just as Heishinjiu was about to put the little bastard away and leave the stone platform to hide in a corner, the thumb-sized turtle shell emitted a dazzling white light. An idea suddenly appeared in Heishinjiu's mind. As expected, all the bastards in the world were related by blood. When Heishinjiu regained her sight, she had already arrived at the square of the Divine Hall of the North Xian Kingdom. Di Baiming and the others were still waiting there. When they saw Heishinjiu come out, they were all pleasantly surprised. However, when Emperor Beijing and the others saw the scarf on Heishinjiu's head, they couldn't help but wonder, what was this Empress Fenghua up to? Could it be that her head was injured? So she wrapped it with a headscarf? Di Baiming and the other two had a rough guess. Xue Wuji couldn't help but burst into laughter. "Little sister Jiu, your hair." Before Xue Wuji could finish his sentence, he was glared back at by Heishinjiu. It was as if she would end their friendship if he continued to spout nonsense. Xue Wuji had no choice but to swallow his words. Just as he was about to say something, a gust of wind blew from somewhere. The scarf on Heishinjiu's head had loosened a little due to this ordeal. Then everyone, Emperor Beijing, Prime Minister Sima, and a few hundred guards, saw Heishinjiu's shiny new hairstyle. Chapter 3674. Glorious image was destroyed. Everyone was stunned by this sudden change. Other than the sound of the altar collapsing, there was no other sound. Prime Minister Sima widened his eyes and looked at their Majesty's shiny bald head in disbelief. Oh God! Was their Majesty quarreling with the Empress and wanting to become a monk? Xue Wuji and Enfeng wanted to laugh but did not dare to. They almost suffered internal injuries. On the other hand, when a certain someone saw Heishinjiu's shiny hairstyle, he recalled many things in the past. He looked at Heishinjiu with a doting and loving gaze. Heishinjiu's mind was blank. As she looked at the headscarf that drifted away with the wind, it was as if she saw her glorious image drifting away with it. However, this fellow quickly calmed down. He took out another headscarf from his storage ring and put it on his head. He didn't explain the matter of the hair, but said, "Emperor Beijing, the black tortoise has decided to sleep for the time being, so it won't appear again for a while. Send someone to guard the divine hall, and don't let anyone in. I still have things to deal with, so I'll take my leave now. Emperor Beijing finally came back to his senses. He nodded blankly and said a few more words to persuade him to stay. He Xinzhou said a few words perfunctorily, then left the divine hall with Prime Minister Sima and the others, leaving the capital city of Beixian Kingdom. On the way, Prime Minister Sima realized that His Majesty and that young Master Di looked normal, so he put his heart back into his stomach. When they arrived outside the capital, Yun Chuzhou said to Prime Minister Sima, "The few of us still have things to do. Bring your men and return to the capital of the East Phoenix Kingdom immediately. If the Li Hen Palace makes trouble before I return, you don't have to panic. You can just join forces with the other 8 kingdoms to resist." Prime Minister Sima was already used to His Majesty disappearing from time to time, so he nodded repeatedly and left with his men. After Yun Chuzhou and the other 3 boarded the flying spiritual artifact, He Xinzhou laughed dryly. "Brother Wuji, I'm really sorry. I don't know what happened to the black tortoise, but it turned into an empty egg in the end. I'll give it to you when the eggshell gives birth to the little black tortoise." Shui Wuji opened his mouth and sighed. "Sigh, it's most likely that I don't have the life of a divine beast or spiritual pet. Otherwise, why would there always be problems? Little sister Jiu, you don't have to blame yourself. You can't force this opportunity." He Xinzhou comforted him a few more times, then said to Di Baiming, "Prince Charming, before we go to the bottomless ice abyss of the immortal Yuan continent, let's find a sea first. I'll release the shadow-skimming giant-winged bird." Di Baiming frowned slightly. "There's no sea on our way to the bottomless ice abyss. In the towering sky continent, only the northern continent has the sea, so you can keep it for now." He Xinzhou was a little discouraged when she heard this. However, time was of the essence, so it was better to first nourish the souls of Chongqi and the others. It was not too late to find a place for these birds to nest after the matter with the Li Hen Palace came to an end. Thus, the 4 of them sped all the way to the valley that led to the boundless ice abyss. No wonder this place is covered in snow all year round. It turns out that it is connected to the boundless ice abyss in the immortal Yuan continent, He Xinzhou said as she looked at the thick snow on the distant mountain. Shui Wuji curled his lips and said, "Little sister Jiu, you don't know that this place is not only very cold, but the demonic beasts are also very fierce. When we came from the bottomless ice abyss, we suffered a lot because our spiritual power was not as strong as it is now. However, it's different this time. Big Brother can deal with those demonic beasts alone." Chapter 3675 Cat Cubs Transformation. The 4 of them chatted and laughed as they entered the valley. Just as Shui Wuji had said, there were many ferocious demonic beasts in the valley. However, because of Di Baiming and Shui Wuji, as well as Enfeng and He Xinzhou, the 4 of them entered the tunnel without much effort. It was very cold in the tunnel, and there were blue demonic insects attacking from time to time. These demonic insects could spit out blue flames. If a mortal met them, they would definitely die. Fortunately, Yun Chuzhou and the rest were all cultivators, so they could use their spiritual energy to resist. After walking for 2 days, they finally passed through the long tunnel and arrived at the bottomless ice abyss. Yun Chuzhou immediately set up the formation of the Great Void Soul Repairing Formation, and then placed Chongqi, Tao Wu, and a bunch of remnant souls into the formation. Although the ancient cultivator corpses in Yun Chujia's storage ring had restrictions and could not be possessed by these remnant souls, it was still very beneficial to solidify their remnant souls. Hence, both Chongqi and the remnant souls of the cultivators enjoyed gathering their souls in the Great Void Soul Repairing Formation. He Xinzhou was nestled in Di Baiming's arms. She was murmuring about how sad she was when Di Baiming was frozen. Shui Wuji looked at the pink bubble between the 2 of them. He could not help but think of the unfaithful girl and his precious son. He felt very sour in his heart. And Feng's expression was also gloomy. It had been a long time since he had heard from Jinji. He did not know when he would see her again. In fact, he would rather Jinji did not ascend to the towering sky continent first. Although the southern continent would soon be taken over by Miss Jiu, the southern continent and the northern continent were not the same. There would be big trouble sooner or later. While the 4 of them were thinking about their own matters, The Mengyensho was so smug that it wanted to come out and experience the great void soul mending formation. Heishinjo did not scold it this time and let it out. How could the rabbit shell of the Mengyensho withstand such a severe cold? It died on the spot. The Mengyensho did not mind. Anyway, there were plenty of rabbit shells. The old ones would not go and the new ones would not come. Mengyensho went into the array as well. Although his condition was different from Chongqi and the others, there was no harm in replenishing it. Heishinjo looked at Mengyensho and couldn't help but think that the cat cub's confinement time was almost up. Therefore, she took the cat cub out of the separate spiritual beast bag and prepared to put it into the big spiritual beast bag. However, she was surprised to find that the cat cub's originally fiery red fur was mixed with some snow-white colors. What was going on? Cat cub, what's wrong with your fur? The cat cub's eyes flashed and said with a blank expression, maybe it's because I have the Pixius bloodline, so there's a slight change. Yunchujo thought about it and agreed. This cat cub had the appearance of a fire-breathing cat before, so it was normal for it to have a change. She took a closer look at the cat cub and exclaimed, Didn't you have a small horn on your head? Why is it gone? The kitten touched the top of its head with its paw and said vaguely, I don't know. Maybe it will grow back in a few days. Yunchujo subconsciously reached out to touch the top of the kitten's head. The kitten immediately broke free from Yunchuji's hand and jumped onto the ground. Yunchujo could not help but be stunned. Before she could say anything, the kitten jumped back into her hand and said with some grievance, Master, I haven't eaten for half a month. I'm so hungry that I can't stand still. Chapter 3676. The silly cuties go hunting. Yunchujo could not help but laugh. Yes, this kitten had been hungry for half a month. It was better to feed it something first. Therefore, Yunchujo took out a small dried fish from her storage ring and said to the kitten, I'll let you off this time. Next time if you get into trouble again it won't be as simple as confinement. Eat it. When the kitten saw the small dried fish, its round eyes showed some disdain. Just when it was hesitating whether to eat it or not, it heard Yunchujo say, Kitten, don't you love eating dried fish the most? Eat it quickly. The kitten's body stiffened. Then it opened its mouth and began to eat the small dried fish. Yunchujo poked the kitten's small head and scolded with a smile, You foodie. Aren't you afraid of choking when you eat so fast? Before Yunchujo finished her sentence, the kitten was stuck by a fish bone, and it was the kind that rolled its eyes. Heishinjo immediately panicked. Was the cat eating the fish stuck by the fish bone? What should she do when she encountered such a difficult problem that only appeared once in 1,000 years? A thought flashed through his mind. He simply picked up the cat's tail and shook it crazily, hoping to get the fish bone out of the kitten's throat. The cat was dizzy from the swing, but fortunately, the fish bone was successfully removed. The cat's eyes revealed a fierce look, but it soon disappeared. Heishinjo put it into the spirit beast bag with the drooping head. After Heishinjo put the cat away, she said to Biming and the other two, This cat hasn't been normal since it ate my rejuvenation pill. I don't know how long it will take for it to become stronger. Biming frowned slightly. Little Jiao, you are too indulgent with those idiots. If you were a little more strict with them, they wouldn't be so useless. The few animals in the spirit beast bag shivered when they heard a certain lord's words. This Jinx just couldn't stand to see them be good. They were always slanderous in front of Heijinji's master. How could they be useless? Heishinjo felt that Biming's words made sense. Although these dumb cubs were still young, they were indeed a little weak. Therefore, Heishinjo released the few dumb cubs from the spirit beast pouch and said to them, There's nothing much to do these few days, you guys go out and hunt. It's a good opportunity to train your cold resistance and combat ability. The other silly cuties were fine, but Xiaomogu could not withstand the cold. Heishinjo also knew that its situation was special, so she kept Xiaomogu. Xiao Hanio was about to act cute and lazy, but when it saw a certain cold gaze, it immediately obediently rolled away like a ball and went hunting. Yunchujo was not worried about the safety of the silly cuties. Although they were trash in Atlas mainland, they were not a problem here. When the dumb cubs were within Heijinji's line of sight, they were quite harmonious. However, once they left Heijinji's line of sight, they would not stop. Xiao Hanio looked at the dumb cubs arrogantly. There's a first come, first served basis. I'm your boss, so you have to listen to me when it comes to hunting. Xiao He and Xiao Hong nodded repeatedly. They had long been subdued by Xiao Hanio, so they were naturally very supportive. The little bastard stared with its round eyes and did not say anything. The cat cub's eyes revealed a trace of craftiness as it nodded its head. Xiao Hanio saw that these silly cuties were very obedient and immediately felt that it was great. It chose a direction and brought the silly cuties to hunt. Chapter 3677. The kitten with a stomachache. When the sky was getting dark, Xiao Hanio brought her little brothers back with great vigor. Yun Chuzhou looked at the loot of the silly cuties and nodded with satisfaction. It seemed that it was better to let them go. In fact, the silly cuties were much more powerful than she had imagined. Thus, in the next few days, Xiao Hanio would bring the silly cuties out to hunt. In the beginning, they were still working together. Later, in order to slack off, Xiao Hanio found a place to sleep in the wind and let the other dumb cubs take turns to hunt. On this day, after Xiao Hanio sent the dumb cubs out, he lay on the ground and slept soundly. When Xiao Hanio was sleeping soundly, he realized that there was movement. He opened his possessed eyes vigilantly. When he saw that it was the cat cub, he said angrily, "Cat cub, why are you back so soon? Where is your prey?" Xiao Hanio said, "My stomach is not feeling well. I will rest for a while and then go hunting. I will be responsible for guarding you so you can sleep for a while." Xiao Hanio curled its lips. It did not believe that Xiao Hanio really had a stomachache. It must be trying to slack off. However, it thought about it. With Xiao Hanio guarding it, it could have a good sleep. Hence, Xiao Hanio stared at Xiao Hanio and said, "All right, then you better watch over Xiao Hanio. If you play any tricks, I won't let you off." Xiao Hanio nodded obediently and lay down not far from Xiao Hanio, helping Xiao Hanio to be on guard. Xiao Hanio was quite pleased in his heart. It was better to be a big shot. Hence, Xiao Hanio closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. A moment later, Xiao Hanio's eyes revealed a fierce look as he quietly approached Xiao Hanio. Sharp spikes suddenly appeared on his claws as he stabbed towards Xiao Hanio's throat. Just when his claws were less than a foot away from Xiao Hanio's throat, a sharp pain came from his spiritual sense. Xiao Hanio fell to the ground and rolled around with his head in his hands. Xiao Hanio was startled by the commotion. It was shocked when it saw the situation in front of it. Xiao Hanio, what's wrong with you?" Xiao Hanio roared, "Be careful, Bai." Xiao Hanio was confused. "Xiao Hanio, be careful of Bai? What's wrong with you?" Xiao Hanio's eyes flashed with a hint of viciousness. Then he said weakly, "My stomach hurt again just now. It's better now. I wanted to warn you that the day is almost over and they haven't come back yet. If we go back late, Master will be angry." Xiao Hanio looked at Xiao Hanio suspiciously. However, he saw that Xiao Hanio's body was soaked in cold sweat. He said with concern, "Since your stomach hurts, quickly go back and ask Master to take a look at you." Xiao Hanio's eyes flickered a few times before he nodded. "All right, then be careful. I'll go back and ask Master to take a look for me." Xiao Hanio nodded. When he saw Xiao Hanio walking towards the camp, he closed his eyes again. What Xiao Hanio didn't know was that after Xiao Hanio left his sight, he made a turn and his eyes revealed a trace of treachery. Originally, he wanted to eat that stupid bird to nourish himself, but he didn't expect that the idiot that he had already suppressed to actually ruin his plan. He couldn't stay by that stupid girl's side anymore, otherwise sooner or later, she and those idiots would see through his plan. When the kitten thought of this, he made a circle and quickly jumped towards the direction of the exit of the 100,000 feet deep ice abyss. If Yun Chuzhou were to see this, she would definitely be shocked that the kitten had such an astonishing speed. He was like a dancing flame on the glacier. Chapter 3678. Light and dark. The cat cub sprinted all the way. Although he encountered a few waves of demonic beasts along the way, and there were even large groups of demonic beasts, he relied on his extremely fast movement techniques to escape. Very soon, he reached the end of the bottomless ice abyss. When the cat cub saw the ice wall that towered into the clouds, he was so angry that he almost fainted. This ice wall was extremely smooth. Although he was good at climbing, he was unable to climb up. The kitten circled around the ice wall for a few dozen times before finally gritting its teeth and muttering, Looks like I can only return to that little girl's side first and then look for an opportunity to escape. As soon as the kitten finished speaking, another voice appeared in its divine sense. White tiger, you are a divine beast in vain. You actually did such a heartless thing as possessing a body. The kitten snorted coldly. Idiot, shut up. If it weren't for the white tiger bloodline in your body, I wouldn't have been involuntarily put into the spirit beast pouch by that smelly girl. So all of this is your own fault. What does it have to do with me? You better behave yourself, or I will really devour you. Idiot. Don't think that I don't know what you are planning. Aren't you just afraid that if you really devour me, Master will notice something strange? White tiger, you are underestimating Master too much. Sooner or later, she will find out that you are a fake. Tisk. Right now, not only do we share a body, but we also share a spiritual sense. Even if that little girl suspects something, she won't notice the abnormality in our spiritual sense. Therefore, she would never have dreamed that her spiritual pet had been possessed by me. When the kitten said this, it couldn't help but frown. In the past, it wouldn't have said such rude words like, because it didn't match its noble status as a divine beast. Fuck. It must have been abducted by those idiots recently. Another voice quickly sounded, if you don't leave my body now, you will regret it sooner or later. The kitten pursed its lips. Just give up on this idea. Not only do you have the blood of a Paishio and a white tiger in your body, but you also have the blood of a Qilin. Moreover, you have eaten the egg liquid that has condensed the essence of the white tiger's body. There is no other perfect shell expelling method in this world. After the kitten finished speaking, its powerful spiritual sense once again suppressed the kitten's spiritual sense. It could not help but recall the events of that day. Although it was only an egg at that time, it already had intelligence. It was a majestic divine beast, so it would not be easily contracted by others. Therefore, even if that idiot in red dripped a lot of blood on the egg, it still forcefully resisted being contracted. It originally thought that it could hide in the ruins during the chaos, but it did not expect that it would be put into the spirit beast pouch by that smelly girl. After it entered the spirit beast pouch, it immediately discovered this perfect shell. When the kitten thought of this, it could not help but feel secretly proud. Fortunately, their white tiger clan had a secret technique that allowed them to attach their own spiritual sense to the original owner's spiritual sense. Moreover, no one could detect the abnormality of the spiritual sense. No matter how smart that smelly girl was, she would never have thought that a divine sense could be divided into two souls, one light and one dark. The original body of that idiot could only be suppressed by her to become the dark soul. When the cat cub saw the ice wall that reached into the clouds, his expression became frustrated again. He originally thought that after he escaped this place, he would devour the original divine soul. This way, he would be able to completely get rid of that smelly girl. He did not expect that there would be an ice wall here, so he could only go back first. Just as the kitten was thinking, he heard Yun Chujia shout from afar, "Kitten, kitten!" The kitten gritted his teeth and used his sharp claws to cut a deep wound on one of his legs. Then he retracted his sharp claws. Chapter 3679. Framing Xiaohenio. The kitten meowed a few times. When it saw Yun Chujia's figure, it limped towards He Xinjiu. Yun Chujio ran a few steps and picked the kitten up. When she saw the wound on its leg, her eyes immediately turned fierce. "Which blind monster hurt you? Go, Master will avenge you." The kitten whimpered. "There's no need to look for it. It's a demon beast with long white fur. I've blinded its eyes. Probably won't be any better." When Yun Chujio heard the kitten's words, she patted its small head with relief. "Good job, kitten. Come, Master will help you apply some medicine powder. You'll recover very soon." As Yun Chujio spoke, she took out some powder to stop the bleeding and sprinkled it on the kitten's leg. Then she tied it carefully with a white cloth. Finally, she tied it with a small bow. The kitten suddenly felt something that it had never felt before. It instinctively resisted this feeling. It rolled its eyes and began to complain. "Master, where is Brother Xiaohenio? That dumbass is waiting at the camp. What's wrong?" Yun Chujio asked in confusion. The kitten said shyly, "Master, although it's wrong to complain, Xiaohenio hasn't hunted for the past few days. It's all because of us. Moreover, my stomach is hurting today. It even forced me to hunt. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been chased here by that demonic beast. Master, I'm not saying this to let you punish Brother Xiao Hanio. I just want to tell you the truth. Yun Chujo narrowed her eyes. The kitten's personality was originally reckless and straightforward. Ever since its body became smaller, it became even more silly and cute. It wouldn't say such white lotus words. Could it be because of the awakening of the Pishio bloodline? Although many questions flashed through her mind, Yun Chujo put on an angry expression. I know. Let's see how we'll deal with that dumbass when I get back. When the kitten heard Yun Chujia's words, a trace of pride flashed across its eyes. It was good that it stayed. It would be a good opportunity to sow discord between the stinky girl and those idiots. Perhaps it would have a chance to eat them. Yun Chujo put the kitten into the spiritual beast bag and returned to the camp. The little black bird was anxiously looking around, especially the little black bird. It was very regretful in its heart. If it had known earlier, it would have personally escorted the kitten back to the camp. Nothing must happen to it. Therefore, when it saw that Yun Chujo had returned, it immediately went up to greet her. Master, where is the kitten? Have you found the kitten? Yun Chujo kicked Xiao Hanio. You dumbass. Say, have you been slacking off recently? You clearly know that the kitten has a stomachache, yet you still let it go hunting. You've really rebelled. From today onwards, you'll be grounded. After Yun Chujo finished speaking, she did not give the Xiao Hanio a chance to explain and directly threw it into a separate spirit beast bag. Xiao Hanio and Xiao Hong wanted to plead for the Xiao Hanio, but when they saw Yun Chujia's gloomy expression, they could only swallow their words. They were prepared to wait for Yun Chujo to calm down before pleading for the Xiao Hanio. On the other hand, the kitten was very proud. See, that idiot was still talking about how smart this little girl was. Bullshit. It seemed that it was right for it to decide to stay. Sooner or later, it would have a chance to feast its eyes. The next day, Yun Chujo let the silly cuties go out to hunt again. The kitten's legs had completely recovered, so it followed obediently, ready to find a chance to frame the other silly cuties again. Chapter 3680 was like a beast after the silly cuties had left. Yun Chujo released Xiao Hanio. Xiao Hanio hugged Yun Chujia's legs with its short wings and began to howl. It howled with grievance. Master, why didn't you give me a chance to explain? Although I was lazy when I found out that the kitten had a stomachache, I told it to come back and ask you for medicinal pills. How did I force it to go hunting? Master, I am your first spiritual pet. We have been through life and death for so many years. You can't just love the new and hate the old. You can't just see the new smiling and not see the old crying. The corner of Xue Wuji and the other's eyes twitched. This Xiao Hanio was as shameless as their master. Yun Chujo said with a gloomy face, Tell me everything that happened yesterday. Xiao Hanio immediately told her everything that happened yesterday, and then said, Master, did the kitten complain to you? I found out that the kitten has been acting strange recently. It ate the white tiger eggs and complained. It's as if it has become a beast. Yun Chujo heard Xiao Hanio's words, and her heart was moved. It was as if it had become a beast. The small horn on her head was gone, and white fur started to appear on her body. She recalled Xiao Hanio's words of, Be careful of the white tiger? Yun Chujo went through everything that had happened recently. Then she had a guess. Could it be careful of the white tiger? Why did the kitten say be careful of the white tiger? And why did it change its words later? Could it be that the kitten had been possessed by the white tiger? But that was not right. If the kitten had been possessed, the contract between them would be terminated. However, there was nothing unusual at the moment. Moreover, she could communicate with the kitten with her spiritual sense as usual. It did not look like a possession. Yun Chujo could not understand it no matter how much she thought about it. However, one thing was certain. There was definitely something wrong with the kitten. Keep an eye on the kittens in the future. Let me know if anything happens. Also, remind the other kittens not to be harmed by the kittens. Xiao Hanio heard Yun Chujia's words. Her possessed eyes immediately shone with admiration. Master, I knew you were the wisest. You would never accuse me wrongly. Don't worry, leave this matter to me. I will keep an eye on the kittens. Yun Chujo nodded. She was still very assured of Xiao Hanyo. Although Xiao Hanyo was not very capable, he was the most scheming. He was the most suitable spy. That night, Yun Chujo found a reason to relieve Xiao Hanyo of his confinement. The next day when they went out to hunt, Xiao Hanyo immediately teamed up with Xiao Hanyo, and the rest to beat up Xiao Hanyo. Kitten, did you fucking complain? Otherwise, why would master punish me without distinguishing between right and wrong? Let me tell you, even if you act like a white lotus flower, don't even think about shaking my position in master's heart. Master's most beloved spiritual pet can only be me. The kitten was beaten until its face was bruised and swollen. It was furious in its heart. Fuck, if I wasn't afraid of being exposed, I wouldn't be able to kill all of you. However, since this ugly bird was very concerned about the stinky girl's attitude towards it, then I will think of a way to let that stinky girl only dote on me and anger these idiots to death. The more the kitten thought about it, the more it felt that this method was not bad. Not only could it vent its anger, but it could also be more beneficial for it to sow discord between these idiots and that stinky girl. It was simply a good way to kill two birds with one stone. Hence, from that night onwards, the cat cub kept trying to gain Yun Chujia's favor. It even acted cute and acted coquettishly. It didn't even care about the integrity of the white tiger. Yun Chujio snorted in her heart, but on the surface, she looked like she doted on the cat cub. From time to time, she would even take out a few dried fish to reward the cat cub. The kitten looked at the dried fish with a face full of bitterness and hatred. It was a dignified white tiger, why would it care about this stupid thing? It was simply disgusting. However, it was afraid that it would be exposed, so it could only bite the bullet and pretend to be greedy. Unfortunately, it was stuck on the fish bone several times. Yun Chujia's details confirmed that there was something wrong with the kitten, but she still could not figure out what was going on. She was afraid of alerting the enemy, so she did not expose it and happily played along with the kitten. Yun Chujio was a little nervous. In such a short time, she did not know if Tao Wu and the rest could give birth to a shell. Yun Chujio entered the formation and first put away the remnant souls of the ancient cultivators. Then she looked in the direction of Tao Wu. Tao Wu's remnant soul was much more solid than before, but it did not give birth to a body. Yun Chujio was already prepared for this, so she was not too surprised. She had just kept Tao Wu into the ancient jade bottle when she heard Meng Yanshou cry out in surprise. Yun Chujio followed its line of sight and saw a yellow puppy lying on the ground. Yun Chujio, don't tell me that this puppy is Chongqi? Where is the beast that I promised? Where is the massacre that I promised? The puppy ran to Yun Chujia's side and hugged Yun Chujia's shoes with its two little paws. Little fairy, I can finally be by your side for a long time in the future. We can finally be in cahoots with each other. Let me ask you, are you surprised? Are you surprised? Hearing the puppy's words, Yun Chujio finally confirmed that this was the idiot Chongqi. She really could not link the puppy in front of her with the majestic Chongqi from before. What exactly happened? When Chongqi saw that Yun Chujio did not say anything, he said to himself, little fairy, aren't you too surprised? I'm also very surprised. Tao Wu did not create a physical body. I was the only one who succeeded. What does this mean? It means that I'm smarter than him. Yun Chujio could not be bothered to listen to Chongqi's boasting anymore. She squeezed out a sentence from between her teeth. How did you become like this? Chongqi was stunned at first, then he said proudly, this is how I can confuse others. No one would have thought that I, the dignified Chongqi, would look like this. Am I very smart? Speak human language. Well, actually, my soul is not strong enough, so I can only give birth to this body for the time being. Chongqi said with a guilty conscience. Yun Chujio looked at the little puppy with disdain, but no matter what, it was still a Chongqi. Maybe it would be powerful in the future, so it was better to keep it first. Therefore, this guy's face suddenly smiled like a flower. Little Chi-Chi, master is teasing you. Come, let's make a contract first and then we can have a good talk. Chongqi was suddenly favored so much that she immediately made a contract with He Xinjiu in a daze. Then she heard a new master say coldly, Buttface, you better behave yourself in the future, or I won't forgive you. Buttface? Where was little Chi-Chi? Where was their mutual love? Seeing that Chong-chi had been tricked, Meng Yanshou couldn't help but laugh. Ha ha ha, butt face? This name was enough to make it laugh for the rest of its life. The reason why it didn't dare to laugh openly was that Chong-chi was the most vengeful. If it were to bear a grudge, it would be a troublesome matter. Meng Yanshou thought that Chong-chi would be so angry that it would jump up and down. However, what happened next made it dumbfounded. Chong-chi was stunned for a moment. Then he grabbed He Xinjia's shoes with his two little paws again. Looking very flattered, little fairy, is dog to my new name? I really like it. Master, do you know that I like bad people like you who go back on their words and change their minds faster than flipping a book? Meng Yanshou. Damn, this Chong-chi's style was indeed strange. He had never seen or heard of it before. He had learned a lot. He Xinjia was also dumbfounded, but she couldn't be bothered with this idiot. She took out the spirit stones from the array core and put the array leaf into her storage ring. At this moment, Di Biming and the others outside finally saw the situation inside the array. The three of them couldn't help but look at the puppy following behind a certain Jiao. What the hell was this? Buttface, who had just come out of the oven, glanced at the three of them and continued to play with a certain Jiao's skirt. Xue Wuji pointed at Buttface and asked in surprise, little sister Jiao, this can't be Tao Wu or Chong-chi, right? How did it become like this? Buttface, who was playing happily, was immediately unhappy when he heard Xue Wuji's words. So what? Did you eat your rice? Or did you drink your water? As long as my master likes me, my master has given me a great name. Buttface said proudly. Xue Wuji was not angry, but he knew that it was the idiot Chong-chi when he heard the tone of his voice. Therefore he asked He Xinjiao, little sister Jiao, this is Chong-chi, right? What kind of name did you give it? Pending one, He Xinjiao touched her nose awkwardly. A good name that was unparalleled in the world? Why did she feel a little guilty for no reason? Seeing that He Xinjiao did not say anything, Chong-chi could not wait to shout, from now on I will be called Buttface. How is it? Did the little fairy give me a cool name? Xue Wuji stumbled and almost sat on the ground. This Chong-chi was not smart, right? Such a name was cool. It was simply too outdated. The corner of a certain honored warrior's eye twitched slightly. In the Dark Continent, the little rascal had given a servant the name Buttface. He did not expect it to be used on Chong-chi now. However, with Chong-chi's current glory, it was a good match to call him Buttface. Xue Wuji covered his mouth and coughed dryly. Yes, a good name. It's definitely a good name. Buttface, your master is really good to you. Chong-chi snorted coldly. Don't think that I don't know that you are snickering. What do you know? The worse master treats me, the better master treats me. No matter how you sow discord, I will never abandon the little fairy. We will depend on each other for life and death. We will be in cahoots with each other and work in cahoots with each other. Xue Wuji and the other two looked at each other. This Chong-chi was probably a psychopath, right? Buttface did not care what Xue Wuji and the other two were thinking. He showed his loyalty to He Xinjiao every day. Little fairy, you are the worst person I have ever met. You are the thickest person I have ever met. No, you have no face at all. Therefore, you must not abandon me, because we bad guys and fierce beasts are a perfect match. Yun Chujo looked at the blue sky speechlessly and said faintly, Buttface, you shouldn't talk so much. Otherwise, I wouldn't mind cutting off your tongue. Buttface immediately covered his mouth with his little paws. Little fairy, you always threaten your spiritual pet. You are so bad. What should I do? I think I love you even more. I can't help it. As soon as Buttface finished speaking, he felt Di Biming's cold gaze. He could not help but tremble and immediately stopped. Yun Chujia's desire to return was like an arrow. So the four of them immediately left the 100,000 feet deep ice abyss and returned to towering sky continent. Just as they left the valley, the sound transmission talisman in Yun Chujia's storage ring started to tremble. Yun Chujo took it out and took a look. It was a message sent by Prime Minister Sima and the other 8 country monarchs. In summary, the main idea was that the Li Hen Palace had already made a move against the Yutian Kingdom, which was the closest to them, when their threats and inducements were unsuccessful. The allied forces of the 9 countries were currently facing off against the people of the Lihen Palace at the borders of the Yutian Kingdom. The Lihen Palace's advantage was that their spirit energy was a level higher than the allied forces of the 9 countries, while the allied forces of the 9 countries had the advantage of having several times more people than the Lihen Palace. Thus, the two sides were currently in a stalemate. When He Xinzhou heard this news, not only did she not panic, she even heaved a sigh of relief. It was fine as long as the Lihen Palace made their move. She was afraid that the Lihen Palace would not make a move. As time passed, the alliance of the 9 countries would definitely loosen up. When that time came, things would not be easy to handle. As for the hateful palace, this fellow did not feel that there was anything to be afraid of. Although the hateful palace had dominated the southern continent for many years and seemed to be the overlord of a region, in reality, the hateful palace relied on their methods to play with people's hearts. In reality, their strength was not as terrifying as they had imagined. Of course, the hateful palace's original plan could not be said to be unshrewd. On one hand, they would use the imperial advisors of various countries to firmly control the public opinion of various countries, and they would become the second emperor of each country. Dian 0v1 cm. However, all of this had completely collapsed because of He Xinzhou, this variable. The imperial advisors of each country had already become street rats. The prestige that the Lihen Palace had accumulated for many years had been destroyed in an instant. In addition, the emperors of each country had long been fed up with the Lihen Palace's oppression. This battle, the Lihen Palace would lose without a doubt. However, it was only a matter of time. It was precisely because He Xinzhou had the confidence to win that she had the leisure to go to the boundless ice abyss to help Chongqi and the others solidify their souls. Otherwise, how could she dare to leave so casually? A few days later, He Xinjia's flying spirit tool arrived on the battlefield. Prime Minister Sima and the emperors of the 8 countries were both pleasantly surprised. They were currently in a stalemate. With this girl's evil schemes and the help of that great killing tool, they believed that the situation would be resolved very quickly. After exchanging greetings with everyone, He Xinzhou went straight to the outside of the camp and said to the people of the Lihen Palace, "Ask your palace master to come out. I have something important to tell him." The people of the Lihen Palace went in to deliver the letter. After a while, the palace master of the Lihen Palace appeared under the escort of everyone. Yun Chuzhou sized him up a few times and was even more certain of her judgment. She curled the corners of her lips and said, "Imperial Preceptor Yuanji, long time no see. At this time, is there still a need to hide?" The palace master of the hateful palace waved his hand, and a mask appeared on his hand, revealing his true appearance. It was the former imperial preceptor of the East Feng Kingdom, Yuanji. Pandian 0v1 Simian Chuzhou said with a smile, "I don't have any business. I'm only giving you a few words of advice out of old feelings. Your hateful palace will suffer a crushing defeat sooner or later anyway, so why are you still here bitterly holding on? Since you are all from the northern continent, then obediently return to the northern continent. Don't you people miss your loved ones? Moreover, the spiritual qi in the northern continent is much denser than in the southern continent. Why must you suffer here?" Yuan Jia's cold face finally showed some stiffness. It was unknown whether it was because Yun Chuzhou had pointed out their identity in the northern continent, or because Yun Chuzhou was so arrogant. After a moment of silence, Yuan Ji said in a deep voice, "Your Majesty Fenghua, since you know that our Lihen Palace has an extraordinary relationship with the northern continent, why do you have to resist stubbornly? You should know that if we are really provoked, we will ask the northern continent for help. You people won't be able to handle it." When Emperor Jinglai and the others heard Yuan Jia's words, they couldn't help but show terrified expressions. The difference between the northern continent and the southern continent was like a ravine. If the Lihen Palace really asked the northern continent for help, would they be able to handle it? Just as they were panicking, they heard Yun Chuzhou laugh. Her laughter was filled with disdain and contempt. "Your words are truly laughable. You are just trying to fool people who don't know the true situation of the northern continent. You are asking the northern continent for help? Your master is merely a faction of the northern continent. Even if his faction could be considered influential in the northern continent, once the news of your master coveting the southern continent spread, Do you think that the other factions of the northern continent would let him have his way? Therefore, it was best to think before threatening someone. Don't make it sound like a joke. Yuanji, you are a smart person. Although the spiritual power of your people from the Lihen Palace is not low, you will definitely lose this protracted battle. Since that is the case, why waste time, manpower, and material resources? If I were you, I would immediately seek instructions from your master. Instead of exhausting this part of the forces in the southern continent, it would be better to withdraw to the northern continent. At the very least, it would be a help. That's all I have to say. I'll give you 3 days to consider. If you don't withdraw your troops by then don't blame me for being rude. After all, my fiancé is a great killer. He does assassinations for no reason. It's simply too easy. After saying this, Yun Chujo didn't wait for Yuan Jia's reply. Instead, she turned around and returned to the camp with a smug look on her face, as if victory was within her grasp. Emperor Jinglai and the others were stunned for a moment before they chased after He Xinjiu with puzzled expressions. Damn it, they would never have dreamed that this girl would actually try to persuade the Lihen Palace to withdraw their troops? Stop joking. If her words could make the Lihen Palace withdraw their troops, they would call her their ancestor. Yuanji stood where he was. No change could be seen on his face, but he sighed deeply in his heart. All these years of planning would probably go down the drain. If he were the pavilion master, he would also agree with what that little girl said. Right now, the hateful palace had already become the public enemy of the southern continent. If this stalemate continued, it was only a matter of time before they would return in defeat. Since that was the case, he might as well retreat to the northern continent. At the very least, he could preserve his strength. Moreover, the pavilion master might not be able to obtain what he wanted. Since that was the case, there was no point in continuing this stalemate. After Emperor Jinglai caught up with Yun Chujo, he followed her into the meeting tent. Yun Chujo took a few sips of tea before she slowly said, "More or less." Emperor Jinglai couldn't hold it in any longer and said mockingly, "Your Majesty Fenghua, I admit that you are indeed smarter than the rest of us, but am afraid that you are exaggerating this time. The Lihen Palace is coming at us menacingly, and their strength is not much weaker than ours. How could they withdraw their troops just because of your words?" Emperor Shaoxian also agreed, "That's right, this war is not a child's play. Moreover, the Lihen Palace has relations with the northern continent's forces. I'm afraid that this matter cannot be settled peacefully." Upon hearing Emperor Shaoxian mention the northern continent, the other monarchs also expressed their opinions. The main point was that the Lihen Palace would never withdraw their troops, and would even seek help from the northern continent. This war would not end for a few more years. Yun Chujo did not interrupt until they were almost done talking. Then she smiled and said, "How about this, let's make a bet. If the Lihen Palace agrees to withdraw their troops, the territory of the Lihen Palace will belong to our Eastern Feng Kingdom. If the Lihen Palace does not agree to withdraw their troops, then after the Lihen Palace is taken down, our East Phoenix Kingdom will not participate in the distribution of the spoils of war. What do you think?" Emperor Jinglai and the others were truly shocked when they heard Yun Chujio's words. They had never expected Yun Chujio to make such a bet. The stakes were too high. It would be fine if they won, but once they lost, they would no longer have a share of the land of the Lihen Palace. The East Phoenix Kingdom would be above the 8 kingdoms in one move, which was equivalent to creating another Lihen Palace. Yun Chujio raised her eyebrows slightly. "What? You don't dare to agree? Didn't you say that everything was in order just now? What about the Lihen Palace coming menacingly? What about the Lihen Palace asking the northern continent for help? Why don't you dare to answer now? It's not that my words are harsh, but you are also the rulers of a kingdom. Don't tell me that you don't have the courage? Or is it that you don't have confidence in your own judgment?" Emperor Jinglai and the others were provoked by He Xinjiu, and they couldn't hold back any longer. They looked at each other and thought to themselves that it was impossible for the Lihen Palace to withdraw their troops. It was not bad for them to use this opportunity to make the East Phoenix Kingdom give up on the future division of their territory. Moreover, even if the Lihen Palace really withdrew, they would refuse to admit it. Would her country still be able to go against the 8 countries? Thus, Emperor Jinglai and the others agreed to Yun Chujio's bet. Yun Chujio said with curved brows and eyes, "Words have no basis. Prime Minister Sima, draft an alliance agreement immediately, in case someone refuses to admit their debt in the future." Prime Minister Sima was now blindly worshipping His Majesty, so he did not consider the consequences if His Majesty failed to make a bet. He immediately drafted an alliance agreement. Emperor Jinglai and the others had thought that it was just words. They did not expect Yun Chujio to actually draft an alliance agreement in a serious manner. However, the arrow was already on the bow, so they had no choice but to force themselves to seal it with the jade seals of various countries. Yun Chujio handed her own alliance agreement to a certain person and said with a smile, "Prince Charming, help me keep it. If anyone refuses to pay up in the future, you can take the alliance agreement and chop off their heads." Chapter 3686 had fallen into a pit. Jinglai D and the others were instantly dumbfounded. They had actually forgotten about the existence of this great killing weapon. If the hateful palace really withdrew their troops, this great killing weapon wouldn't just stand by and watch them break the agreement. Even if he couldn't fight against four hands with two fists, he could sneak into their imperial palace and take their lives at any time. This was truly a death sentence. At this moment, Emperor Jinglai and the others finally came to a realization. Could it be that they had fallen into a pit? Emperor Jinglai and the others spent 3 days uneasily. They didn't eat well or sleep well, afraid of hearing the news that the Lihan Palace had withdrawn their troops. Speaking of which, they felt conflicted. On one hand, they were afraid that the Lihan Palace would withdraw their troops and lose the bet. On the other hand, they hoped that the Lihan Palace would withdraw their troops so that they could resume their daily lives and avoid the suffering of the soldiers. 3 days later, Yuan Ji and Empress Jo met again. Yuan Ji's cold expression was somewhat bleak. "Your Majesty Fenghua, our Lihan Palace has agreed to leave the southern continent, but your 9 countries alliance army has to give us half a month to withdraw." Yun Chujio nodded. "Yes, no problem. In half a month we will take over the Lihan Palace. If there are still people from the Lihan Palace remaining, kill them without mercy." Yuan Ji looked deeply at Yun Chujio, not knowing if it was a threat or an admonition. "Your Majesty Fenghua, showing off might not be a good thing. Please think twice before you do anything." Yun Chujio was slightly taken aback. Then she laughed. Her smile was bright and unrestrained. "I will also give you a piece of advice. A man chooses a wise ruler and a minister. A bird chooses a good tree to perch on. I will welcome you to join me at any time. Only by following me will you have a future." Yuan Ji's face stiffened. He had never dreamed that Yun Chujio would be so arrogant to such an extent. He would join her? He, as a protector of the 9 pavilions, would join her? What a fool's dream. Yuan Ji clearly did not have any intention of entangling himself with Yun Chujio. He turned around and returned to the camp of the Lihan Palace. Emperor Jinglai and the others were all stunned on the spot as if they had been struck by lightning. It was over. They had really fallen into a pit. It was still the kind of pit that would last for 10,000 years. They had finally gotten rid of that wolf from the Lihan Palace, and now they had nurtured the East Phoenix Kingdom into a tiger. Could they still have a good life in the future? Yun Chujio said to the 8 people with a smile, "Let's go. Today is a good day to celebrate. Let's go back and celebrate." Emperor Jinglai and the others were not in the mood to celebrate. They wished they could bang their heads against the wall right now. However, they felt a certain someone's cold gaze and could only reluctantly go to the meeting tent. Soon someone served the food and wine. Emperor Jinglai and the others finally realized what was going on. Damn it, this meeting tent had always been set up in the East Phoenix country's camp. Why hadn't they noticed it before? This girl must have made up her mind a long time ago. She was truly insidious and cunning, shameless. After drinking a few cups of wine, Yun Chujio sighed. "Sigh. I know that you are all cursing me in your hearts. It's nothing more than a despicable act of taking advantage of the situation, isn't it?" Emperor Jinglai and the others revealed embarrassed expressions. They thought to themselves, "At least you know your own limits." However, what was the use of this? Could it be that you could give up the territory of the hateful palace? Just as they were cursing in their hearts, They heard Yun Chuzhou say faintly, "Since all of you are unwilling, then the previous agreement will be nullified. Let's split the territory of the hateful palace equally." Chapter 3687. I am thinking of the big picture. Emperor Jinglai and the others couldn't believe their ears. Had this little girl found her conscience? She was actually willing to give up the fat meat in her mouth? Yun Chuzhou seemed to have noticed the suspicion of the others. She immediately took out the alliance contract from her storage ring and tore it into pieces. "The alliance contract has been broken. You should believe it now, right?" It was only then that Emperor Jinglai and the others believed Yun Chuzhou's words. They were overjoyed and kept complimenting her, wishing that they could praise Yun Chuzhou like a flower. Prime Minister Sima, who was standing at the side, felt as if he had heard a dog's voice in his heart. Had their emperor gone mad, or was he stupid? He had actually given up this good opportunity to surpass the 8 nations. After Emperor Jinglai and the others praised He Xinjiu, they suddenly felt that the dishes were fragrant and the wine was thick. They were in a great mood. "Everyone, the Lihan Palace will retreat in a few days. How do you think we should divide the forces of the Lihan Palace?" Yun Chuzhou said with a smile. Emperor Jinglai immediately said excitedly, "Our transformation heavenly kingdom won't fight with everyone. We just need to divide the area near Lotus City to our transformation heavenly kingdom." Hearing Emperor Jinglai's words, the kings of the other countries immediately had ugly expressions on their faces. "Your Majesty Jinglai, do you take us for fools? There are 2 spirit mineral veins near Lotus City, which are the richest places in the territory of the Lihan Palace. Why should we change the heavenly state for you?" Emperor Jinglai argued with a red face. "Why? Because our change the heavenly state has contributed the most this time. Naturally, our change the heavenly state should be the first to choose." "Pooey! You shameless bastard! How can your transformation heavenly kingdom contribute the most? Does your transformation heavenly kingdom contribute more than our Zhu heavenly kingdom? What does your Zhu heavenly kingdom count as? It's still our Hao heavenly kingdom that contributes the most. Lotus City should belong to our Hao heavenly kingdom." Yun Chuzhou chewed on the fruit and looked coldly at Emperor Jinglai and the others who were quarreling with each other. As expected, people could only share hardships but not wealth. Look, the Lihan Palace had yet to retreat and they were already fighting. Just as the 8 country emperors were about to fight, the teacup in Yun Chuzhou's hand fell to the ground. The sound of the teacup breaking finally made the red-faced Emperor Jinglai and the others quiet down. Then, they looked at Yun Chuzhou in confusion. Yun Chuzhou said coldly, "Is it fun? Do you think there will be a result if you continue to argue like this?" Emperor Jinglai and the others looked at each other unwillingly, but they did not say anything. Yun Chuzhou's tone became even colder. "I can already foresee the future of our southern continent in the near future. Everyone will definitely fight over the division of the Lihan Palace's territory. Perhaps all 8 countries will participate in the war, and in the end there will be chaos. At this time the Lihan Palace will definitely make a comeback. When the time comes we will take them down one by one. All of you will be waiting to become the ruler of a fallen country." Although Emperor Jinglai and the others didn't say anything, they were obviously not convinced. They felt that Yun Chuzhou was just scaring them. "Do you think I am scaring you? Even if the hateful palace doesn't make a comeback, there will definitely be other forces from the northern continent that will infiltrate. The southern continent is like a piece of fat meat in the eyes of the various forces of the northern continent. They all want to take a bite out of it. If the southern continent were to fall into chaos, they would definitely infiltrate in all sorts of names. At that time, not to mention your throne, everyone would become slaves of the northern continent. Do you think that I made you sign the BET in order to take advantage of you? Wrong. Very wrong. I am willing to be a villain for the sake of the big picture." Chapter 3688 is what you think it is. Yun Chuzhou glanced at Emperor Jinglai and the others before continuing. "Only if our East Phoenix Kingdom is slightly stronger than you can we have the right to speak and maintain the peace of the 9 nations. You must think that I'm being hypocritical, but to you, power and the throne are extremely important. To me these are just fleeting memories. I've never cared about these things. I have always been a person who is indifferent to fame and fortune. Everyone. Indifferent to fame and fortune? Don't you fucking feel your face ache when you say these words? Furthermore, this emperor can guarantee to all of you that the situation of the southern continent's 9 countries coexisting will not change. Your lives will not be any different from before. Moreover, if all of the spirit stone mines in your country that were originally controlled by the Lihen Palace are returned to you, our Eastern Phoenix Kingdom will not take a single cent. You can choose what you want to do. I will not force you. After all, I am a reasonable person. After Yun Chuzhou finished speaking, she calmly looked at Emperor Jinglai and the others with a casual expression. If Emperor Jinglai and the others had not fallen out with each other at the beginning of the banquet, they would naturally have discussed it. However, now that they did not like each other, there was no need for them to discuss it. They could only make their own plans. They had to admit that what this girl said made some sense. If the territory of the Lihen Palace was not evenly divided, it would inevitably lead to war. The people of the northern continent might take advantage of the situation. According to what they had said earlier, handing over the territory of the Lihen Palace to the East Phoenix Kingdom could be considered a solution. After all, although this girl had a lot of bad intentions, she did not dare to risk the world's disapproval. She would really openly go against the 8 kingdoms. Moreover, she had taken the initiative to give up on the bet. If they were to take it seriously, they had no other choice. Thus, Emperor Jinglai and the others had stiff expressions on their faces. In the end, they agreed to give all of the territory of the Lihen Palace to the East Phoenix Kingdom. He Xinjiu was not ecstatic. She only had a calm expression on her face, as if she was trying to act pretentious. Emperor Jinglai and the others persisted for a while before they left. After sending everyone away, Prime Minister Sima congratulated He Xinjiu and asked suspiciously, "Your Majesty, aren't you afraid that they won't agree with you if you break the alliance agreement?" He Xinjiu curled her lips and took out an alliance agreement. She said faintly, "The one that was destroyed is just a piece of waste paper. When have I ever made such a loss-making deal?" Prime Minister Sima. "Your Majesty, what should we do next? The East Phoenix Kingdom and the Lihen Palace are separated by the Yutian Kingdom and the Yangtian Kingdom. I'm afraid that it will be a little inconvenient to govern them," Prime Minister Sima said while looking at the map. "What's inconvenient about it? The East Phoenix Kingdom is in the middle of the 9 countries. It's the best place to develop and do business. As for the territory of the Lihen Palace, let's make it the capital of the Towering Sky Empire." Prime Minister Sima's old eyes widened. He could not believe his ears. "The Towering Sky Empire? Your Majesty, what do you mean?" "What you think I mean." He Xinjiu curled her lips. "Let's not settle the title first. Let's take over the territory of the Lihen Palace first." Since Emperor Jinglai and the others had already taken a step back, they would take a second and a third step back. They had been enslaved by the Lihen Palace for so many years and had endured it. This showed that they were very timid and would agree with this emperor's idea. Moreover, setting up the Towering Sky Empire isn't like taking away their throne. It's just making them vassal states. It's not a big deal. Go ahead and do it. Chapter 3689. Atlas Empire. Prime Minister Sima did not even know how he walked out of the meeting tent. He was truly stunned by His Majesty's step-by-step plan. The daughter of an official from a third-class country who had been brought back from a lower-class continent had actually become the female emperor of Atlas Southern Continent in less than 2 years. This was simply something that ordinary people did not dare to dream about. However, His Majesty had done it. His Majesty did not have any background, nor did she have any superb spiritual power. She had actually relied on her intelligence to strategize and unify Atlas Southern Continent. What kind of heroic feat was this? Prime Minister Sima only felt an indescribable excitement surging in his heart. It could be considered that he had been blessed by His Majesty. He was originally a prime minister of a third-tier country. Now that he was about to become the prime minister of Atlas Empire, his ancestral grave was really emitting green smoke. In the meeting tent, Xue Wuji clicked his tongue and said, "Little Sister Jiu, in terms of scheming, I am ashamed to admit that I am inferior. Your ability to play with people's hearts is something that I will never be able to learn in my next life. Yun Chuzhou glanced at him. Brother Wuji, why do I feel that you are mocking me instead of complimenting me? Shui Wuji laughed out loud. I am most likely influenced by butt-face. Even when I say good things, I say bad things. Yun Chuzhou pursed her lips. She was also very helpless. Her spiritual power was insufficient, so she could only gather her intelligence. If she didn't play some tricks, how could she quickly expand her power? How could she quickly make money? She still had to raise De Hua, that money-burning good for nothing. Half a month later, the people of the Li Hate Palace had indeed retreated from the southern continent. The people of the East Phoenix Kingdom took over the territory of the Li Hate Palace, so Yun Chuzhou naturally moved into the Li Hate Palace. This fellow was afraid that when the Li Hen Palace retreated, it would set up some sort of array formation in the palace. He searched inside and out dozens of times, and after confirming that there was nothing wrong, he moved in. When the Li Hen Palace retreated, not only did they take away all the good things in the palace, they even used barbaric methods to plunder a large part of the mineral vein. Yun Chuzhou had long expected this, so she was not too surprised. After all, this small loss was negligible compared to the long-drawn-out war. After another half a month, after the East Phoenix Kingdom had completely taken control of the situation, He Xinzhou sent the national letter to Emperor Jinglai and the other three. Translated into plain English, it read, Everyone, we cannot have a leaderless army in the southern continent. After thinking about it, I am the most suitable to be the leader. Although I am a little young and I do not have enough experience, I am kind-hearted and I have a good fiancé. Therefore, I have decided to establish the Towering Sky Empire in 10 days. When that time comes, I will ascend the throne shamelessly. Do not think about objecting because objections are also invalid. Although I have always loved peace, I am not afraid of you if we really fight. Moreover, even if I become the female emperor of the Towering Sky Empire, your position as the ruler of the country will still be secure. There will be no harm to you. So just accept your fate. Finally, I would like to remind you to remember to bring a generous congratulatory gift when you come. Otherwise, I will be unhappy. When Emperor Jinglai and the others received the national letter, 5 of them fainted from anger. Although the other 3 did not faint from anger, they were still trembling from anger. This female Emperor Fenghua was really too shameless. The Towering Sky Empire? What happened to the peaceful coexistence? What happened to the agreement that the 9 nations would stand side by side? Wasn't this in turn turning them all into vassal states? Turning them all into her subjects? It turned out that this step was all planned by her. They were simply blinded by the lard oil in their hearts and actually thought that she was a good person. She was simply a devil who ate people without spitting out their bones. Chapter 3690. The coronation ceremony. Although Jinglai Emperor and the others were furious, they had no choice but to accept it in the end. So what if they didn't accept it? Was there really going to be a war? They were used to being at ease. If they hadn't been forced to do so last time, they wouldn't have rebelled against the Li Hen Palace. Therefore, during the coronation ceremony, Jinglai Emperor and the others eagerly brought expensive gifts to pay their respects. He Xinjia's name had always been abandoned, and the name of Atlas Empire had been decided. This fellow was too lazy to give himself another title. She was still the peerless female emperor of the world, or the female emperor of the world. After the coronation, everyone knelt down and shouted, Female Emperor of Magnificence is a peerless beauty in the world. Female Emperor of the Wind and Flowers sink the fish fall the geese close the moon shame. Female Emperor of Zephyr is invincible. He Xinzhou felt that every pore on her body was relaxed. She was so beautiful that she could not be more beautiful. After the glorious coronation ceremony, He Xinzhou lived a blissful life of eating, drinking, and flirting with the gigolo. Unfortunately, a few days after the blissful life, Di Baiming left with Shui Wuji and Enfeng. This guy waved his handkerchief and reluctantly sent Di Baiming away. Then, he put his mind on governing the country. Although Emperor Jinglai and the others were still honest, they might cause trouble one day. Therefore, He Xinzhou thought of a few ways to restrict them and arranged for Prime Minister Sima to do it. Prime Minister Sima was as busy as a top all day, but the old man became more and more energetic. He immediately went to do it. Seeing that the matter was progressing smoothly, Yun Chujo shifted her attention to cultivation. She counted with her fingers. It had been a long time since Wu Yun had formed a group to take revenge, so why was there still no movement? Although little Wu Yun usually absorbed some of the power of lightning, it was simply a drop in the bucket for a pervert like her. It was not of much use at all. Without the lightning, Hei Shinjo could do nothing but stare helplessly. She had no choice but to get people to collect formulas for refining pills and talismans and spend the whole day in the imperial palace. One day, while Hei Shinjo was hiding in the imperial study making talismans, a palace maid came in to report. "Your Majesty, Crown Prince Yun has something to see you about." The Crown Prince Yun that the palace maid mentioned was Yun Jichen. He and Prime Minister Sima could be said to be Hei Xinjia's right-hand men. Hearing that Yun Jichen wanted to see her, Hei Shinjo naturally agreed. After the two of them met, they exchanged a few pleasantries. In private, the two of them still addressed each other as brother and sister. Yun Jichen went straight to the point and explained the reason for his visit. "Little sister Jiu, in a few days, the Yun family will hold the ancestor worship ceremony once every 10 years. Grandfather has sent a message and wants you to go back and attend the ancestor worship ceremony. What do you think?" Yun Chujia's eyes flashed. She naturally knew old King Yun's intention. It was nothing more than that she had made a fortune and wanted to show off in front of the ancestor's grave. It just so happened that this fellow had nothing to do recently and had not seen her grandfather and grandmother for a long time. It would be good to go back and pay respects to her ancestors and take a break. Therefore she nodded. "I miss my grandfather and grandmother a little too. I will arrange the matters at hand and set off in 3 days." Seeing that Yun Chujo had agreed, Yun Jichen was naturally filled with joy. Just as he was about to say something, he heard Hei Shinjo say, "Fifth brother, go down and prepare well. No matter what, I am still the Qingtian Empire's female emperor of glory. You know what I mean." Yun Jichen was stunned at first. Then he understood the underlying meaning of this fellow's words. This fellow just wanted to go back and show off. Chapter 3691. Ancestor Worship Ceremony. 10 days later, Empress Jiu and her entourage's flying spirit tools arrived in city. Although Yun Chujo had repeatedly sent letters to old King Yun and the old princess consort to move to the capital of Qingtian Empire, the old lattice homeland was hard to leave and she had always stayed in the old King Yun's mansion. On the other hand, the other few houses of the Yun family had basically moved to the capital of a first-class country. This time they had all returned. The imperial residence of King Yun was once again bustling with noise and excitement. At this moment, everyone was waiting respectfully for Yun Chujo outside in city. After all, today was different from the past. Even if they were relatives, their statuses were as different as clouds and mud. They were afraid that Yun Chujo would be dissatisfied with them. Everyone looked at the several flying spirit tools that were approaching from afar, and could not help but sigh in their hearts. Who would have thought that the little girl from back then would suddenly become the female emperor of the towering Sky Empire? This was something that no one would have ever dreamed of. The flying spirit tools that the guards were riding on landed first, isolating the surrounding commoners who were watching the show. Then, there were more than a dozen beautiful palace maids were lined up on both sides, laying a snow-white carpet on the ground. At this moment, the most luxurious flying spirit tool finally landed on the ground. Hei Shinjo got down from the flying spirit tool and slowly walked towards the crowd. Today, Empress Jiu was wearing a red dress that was as bright as fire, which increased her aura. The crowd couldn't help but kneel down and kowtow to her. Yun Chujo didn't stop her. Sometimes being too friendly wasn't necessarily a good thing. When it was time to establish one's authority, one still had to establish one's authority. Of course, this fellow didn't go so far as to ask old Duke Yun and old consort Yun to bow to her. She had already asked someone to support the two elders to the side. After bowing, Hei Shinjo said a few polite words. Then she hopped over to the old consort's side and held her arm. She said playfully, "Grandmother, do you miss little Jiu?" The old consort really couldn't connect the dignified female emperor from before with this little girl who looked like a monkey. She was stunned for a moment before she said with a smile, "Of course, grandmother misses you. Let's go. Grandmother has prepared a lot of your favorite food for you." A group of people escorted Hei Shinjo to the Cloud King's mansion. Hei Shinjo was somewhat moved by the fact that she had returned to the Cloud King's mansion. When she first entered the Cloud King's mansion, it could be said that she was treading on thin ice. Now she was finally able to hold her head up high. When she came, she had planned to show off. However, when she really saw the people from the Cloud King's mansion, her thoughts of showing off faded and she felt that it was meaningless. She even did not want to go to the ancestor worship because this guy finally realized that the last time she went to the ancestor worship, she went to the ancestor's tomb in the middle of the night. If it was not for the black bead that woke her up, something might have happened. However, in the end, this guy still went to the Floating Cloud Mountain's ancestor's tomb to worship the ancestor reluctantly because of old Duke Yun and old consort Yun. Hei Shinjo comforted herself. This time, not only did she have a high level of spiritual power, but she also brought a lot of guards with her. It should not be the same problem as last time. Moreover, she was determined not to stay over. She did not believe that there would be any problems in broad daylight. After the members of the Yun family arrived at the Yun family's ancestral tomb, an elder from the family clan began to host the ancestral worship ceremony. Hei Shinjo followed the crowd like a puppet to pay respects to the ancestors. When the ancestor worship ceremony was more than halfway through, the elder from the family clan specially gave a scholarly speech. It was nothing more than praising Hei Xinjia's achievements in a variety of ways, giving the Yun family face. Hei Shinjo was originally a little drowsy. When she heard this, her eyes immediately widened. Oh my, there was such a treatment. Chapter 3692 stayed in the manner. It had to be said that the person who wrote this toast was not bad. Every sentence had reached Hei Xinjia's heart. Hei Shinjo was simply too beautiful. At the end of the ancestor worship ceremony, this fellow was still somewhat unsatisfied. He wished that he could let people recite that toast 10 or 8 times more. At this time, the sky was already turning dark. According to the old King Yun and the old consort, they would naturally go to the manor for a night. However, Hei Shinjo lied and said that she had something important to do, so she had to hurry back. When the old King Yun and the old consort heard this, they could only decide to return overnight. When the Yun family had just left the ancestral mausoleum a few miles away, a group of people came from afar. The leader was Yun Fengde, whom Yun Chujo had met previously. He was also the son of the leader of the Yun family, who was in charge of guarding the mausoleum. Yun Fengde hurried to the front. He had a puzzled look on his face. "Patriarch, are you leaving? Don't you always have to stay at the manor? Why are you in a hurry to leave this time? But when I received you last time, was there anything that wasn't done well enough?" Old Duke Yun's face was somewhat embarrassed. He explained, "Fengde, you're thinking too much. It's just that little Joe has something to deal with. You also know that she is now the ruler of the Towering Sky Empire, so she naturally has a lot of things to deal with, so we plan to leave overnight." Although old Duke Yun's words were an explanation, it was not difficult to hear that there was a hint of pride in his words. There was a kind of pride that the Yun family had in having a daughter who had just grown up. Yun Fengde seemed to have only noticed Yun Chujo in the crowd at this time. He hurriedly knelt down and saluted, "Greetings, Your Majesty. I didn't know that Your Majesty was here, so I have neglected you. Please forgive me, Your Majesty." Yun Chujo blinked her eyes. This person was lying through his teeth. Zhuangzi was so close to the ancestral tomb. How could he not know that she had come with him to worship the ancestors? If he had not been paying attention to the situation here, how could he have rushed over when they had just left a few miles away? However, the rules of the Yun family were also quite strange. The Yun family members who were responsible for guarding the tomb were not allowed to participate in the worship of the ancestors. It was simply unbelievable. Although several thoughts flashed through Yun Chujia's mind, she did not show it on her face. She said calmly, "Those who don't know won't be blamed. Get up." Yun Fengde then stood up and said, "Your Majesty, it's difficult to walk through the dense forest at night. Why don't we go to the village to rest for a night? It's not too late to leave when the sky is getting brighter." Yun Chujo was about to refuse when it suddenly started to rain. Yun Chujo frowned. It was difficult to walk in the rain, but she was worried that her grandfather and grandmother would not be able to take it, so she could only stay the night. Therefore she nodded. All right, then we'll stay at the manor for the night. Sorry to bother you. Yun Fengda quickly said a few polite words and brought the group into the manor. The people of the Yun family stayed in the same guest house as last time, and it was very clean. As soon as everyone arrived, someone from the manor immediately brought hot water and hot dishes. They were the spirit rice, chicken, duck, and fish eggs produced by the manor. Hei Shinjo ate until her mouth was full of oil. She felt that it was not bad to stay in the manor for a night. At most she would not sleep tonight. What could happen? After dinner, everyone washed up and rested. Hei Shinjo was arranged to stay in a separate room. In order to resist sleepiness, Hei Shinjo released Buttface to relieve her boredom. After all, this guy looked like a yellow puppy. No one would think that he was an amazing spiritual beast. Chapter 3693 Re-entering the ancestral tomb. Buttface was suffocating in the spirit beast's bag, and was finally released. Naturally, the room was filled with fun. Yun Chujo couldn't bear to look at him. With his idiotic appearance, even if there was a sign of Chong-Chi hanging around his neck, no one would believe that he was one of the four great fierce beasts Chong-Chi. Buttface hopped around the room for a while and moved closer to Hei Xinjia's bedside. Originally, he was planning to jump onto the bed, but when he remembered the jealous nature of a certain person, he still obediently laid on the bedside. Little fairy, it's already so late. Why aren't you sleeping? Did you miss me? Chong-Chi said shamelessly. Hei Shinjo ignored this idiot. She lay on the bed and thought that since Yun Fengda insisted on keeping them here, he must have some kind of plan. What exactly was his plan? Seeing that Yun Chujo ignored him, Buttface did not give up. Instead, he felt that such a cool master was a rare good master in the world. Listening to Buttface's chattering by the bed, Hei Shinjo could not help but feel sleepy. She said to Buttface, "You guard well. I'll take a nap." Buttface immediately said obsequiously, "Little fairy, rest assured and sleep. I promise to guard you well." A moment later, Yun Chujo fell into a deep sleep while Buttface stayed by the bed dutifully. It had to be said that although this guy's brain was a little strange, he was still reliable. The patter of rain outside gradually stopped, and the full moon emerged from the thick layers of clouds. The clear light sprinkled into the room, making everything appear quiet and peaceful. When Buttface saw that the moon had come out, he could not help but be a little excited. He began to play with his own shadow on the ground foolishly, and for a moment he was having a lot of fun. At this moment, Yun Chujo suddenly sat up. Her eyes were empty and vacant, and she left the room like a ghost. She was so fast that Buttface did not have time to react. When Buttface reacted, he only saw an afterimage of Yun Chujo. Buttface was dumbfounded. What happened to the little fairy? Was she sleepwalking? He had never heard that she had this problem. Although Chong-Chi was very confused, he was afraid that Hei Shinjo would be in danger, so he chased after the afterimage. Yun Chujia's figure was as fast as a phantom. Although there were people patrolling the manor, no one noticed that she had left the manor. Some people noticed Buttface, but seeing that he was only a yellow puppy, they didn't think much of it and let him run out of the manor. Buttface chased after her fiercely, and finally saw Yun Chujo standing in the Yun family's ancestral mausoleum from afar. At this moment, the Yun family's ancestral mausoleum was under the moonlight. It was indescribably strange. Buttface couldn't help but shiver. He felt that there was something unusual about this place. Buttface kept calling Yun Chujo with his spiritual sense, but it was completely useless. Buttface thought that since it was like this, he would just bite the little fairy. If she was in pain, it might be better. Therefore, Buttface pounced toward Hei Shinjo. When he got close to Hei Shinjo, he jumped up and bit her hand. Ouch! Yun Chujo screamed and looked at the situation in front of her in a daze. Little fairy, you're finally awake. You scared me to death. Why are you sleepwalking all of a sudden? Buttface nagged. Yun Chujo didn't answer Buttface. Instead, she said in horror, "Let's go. Let's leave this place quickly." Buttface also felt that this place was very strange. So he quickly followed Yun Chujio out of the ancestral tomb. Chapter 3694. Meng Yanshou. There was only one thought in Yun Chujio's mind, and that was to leave this place immediately. If the first time was a coincidence, there was definitely something wrong with the second time. There must be some secret hidden in the Yun family's ancestral grave. However, she was not interested in finding out the secret. It was more important to leave this place as soon as possible. Yun Chujio originally thought that there would be some kind of trouble when she left, such as being trapped by an array formation or something crawling out of the grave. However, none of the strange things that she imagined happened. She and Buttface had successfully arrived near the manor. Although the guards had discovered them, they did not dare to ask too much. They obediently let them go and let her into the manor. Yun Chujio returned to her room still in shock. Buttface, who was usually talkative, had also calmed down. After a moment, Buttface could not help but ask, "Little fairy, what happened just now?" Yun Chujio shook her head. "I don't know what happened either. I have no memory of what happened just now, and I've had such an incident before." Buttface's interest was piqued. He asked Yun Chujio to tell him about what happened last time. After hearing that, he wagged his tail and said, "This thing is quite strange. Why does it feel like something that pervert did?" Yun Chujio knew that the pervert that Buttface was referring to was Meng Yanshou. Her heart skipped a beat. Needless to say, this situation was really similar to how Meng Yanshou controlled humans. She immediately released Meng Yanshou. Meng Yanshou had already learned about what was happening outside from Xiao Hanio's mouth. As soon as it was released, it glared at Buttface and cursed him in its heart. "Damn it, you are the pervert, your family is all perverts. Besides, what does this little fairy being possessed have to do with him? He actually made him the scapegoat." It was really detestable. Although Meng Yanshou hated Buttface in his heart, he only dared to glare at him a few times. After all, Buttface was a fierce beast. If he recovered his strength in the future, it would be terrible for him to take revenge on Meng Yanshou. When Yun Chujio saw Meng Yanshou's appearance, she knew that Meng Yanshou had a general understanding of the situation. She asked Curly Hair, "What do you think?" Meng Yanshou said unhappily, "What can I think? I'm not your spiritual pet. I can see what's happening outside with your spiritual sense. I'm just a poor little thing that I picked up." Yun Chujio. Why did these words sound so sour? Buttface, who was at the side, rolled around laughing. "Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Little fairy, it's jealous. It's jealous of me. It must be jealous because it thinks that Curly Hair doesn't sound as good as Buttface." Meng Yanshou. Well, in terms of name, it still felt that the black-hearted little girl was much better to it than this idiot. Buttface? Damn it, if it was given such a name, it would rather bang its head against the wall. Yun Chujio coughed dryly. "Curly Hair, it's not that I don't want to accept you as a spiritual pet, but your main body is in the Tianyuan continent. Right now, I still have no way to break the 10,000-year black iron chain on your body. Don't worry, when the time is right, I will definitely save your main body and let you be my spiritual pet." Meng Yanshou snorted coldly. "Humph, I don't care about spiritual pets or spiritual pets. I just feel that Buttface has wronged me. What does this have to do with me? Why did he throw the blame on my head?" Yun Chujio was too lazy to expose him. She said, "Curly Hair, we are not suspecting you. We just think that you are knowledgeable, so we want to ask your opinion." Chapter 3695. The Mystery of the Ancestral Grave. When the nightmare beast heard Yun Chujio's words, its mouth immediately split open and it said smugly, "So that's how it is. Then you've really asked the right beast." Meng Yanshou. "I've thought about it carefully just now. The 2 times you've come to pay respects to the ancestors were on a full moon night. Could it be that your Yun family's ancestors were lonely underground and wanted to find you to accompany them?" Scram! Yun Chujio kicked the Meng Yanshou to the corner of the wall. It was pure nonsense. However, there was one point that it made sense. The 2 times were indeed on a full moon night. Could it be that there was something in the ancestral mausoleum that only came out on a full moon night? How did that thing control her? One thing was certain. That thing could only control her after she fell asleep. What was going on? Meng Yanshou limped up from the corner of the wall. He said mysteriously, "Little fairy, why don't you arrest Yun Fengde and interrogate him? I think he should know something. Otherwise, he wouldn't have insisted on letting you stay for the night." Yun Chuzhou held her chin and thought for a while. She decided not to alert the enemy first. She had a bad feeling that it was better not to see the light of day about the secret of the Yun family's ancestral tomb. She always felt that this was an extraordinary secret. Anyway, she would not come to worship the ancestors no matter what. Even if there was something fishy about the ancestral tomb, it would not bother her. It was not worth the risk. Yun Chuzhou kept her eyes wide open until dawn. Just after breakfast, Yun Fengde came over. Yun Fengde only said a few words to persuade her to stay. He also said that his father happened to be in closed-door cultivation, so he was impolite to Yun. Old Duke Yun exchanged a few pleasantries with him, and then the Yun family left the manor to return. On the way back, Yun Chuzhou remembered what Yun Fengde said in the morning, and her heart moved. Why was Yun Fengde father in closed-door cultivation when they came here twice? Wasn't it too much of a coincidence? Thinking of this, Yun Chuzhou asked old Duke Yun unintentionally, "Grandfather, is Yun Fengde father, that is, the manor head, absent every time he offers sacrifices to his ancestors?" Old Duke Yun frowned and thought for a moment. "Not really. I can see him sometimes, but I haven't seen him most of the time." Yun Chuzhou's heart moved again. "Then when can I see him? I'm really curious. Why haven't I seen him these 2 times? Old Duke Yun couldn't help but laugh. "I guess he happened to be in closed-door cultivation. I might see him next time." The old consort at the side laughed and said, "Speaking of which, I realize that he doesn't seem to be around when we arrive at the 15th. Little Joe, you might be able to meet him the next time you come to visit on another day." Yun Chuzhou smiled and replied a few sentences, but she was shocked in her heart. It seemed that what happened in the ancestral tomb was most likely related to that manor head. It was just that she did not know what role he played in it. Thinking about it carefully, there were many strange things about the Yun family's ancestral mausoleum. They had sent a branch to guard the mausoleum, but they were not allowed to participate in the ancestral worship. Moreover, all these strange things only happened to her. Yun Chuzhou thought about it for a long time, but she could not come up with any clues. She decided not to think about it anymore. After all, she would never go to that damn place again. Yun Chuzhou originally planned to stay in city for a few more days, but after receiving the voice transmission talisman from Prime Minister Sima, her expression instantly turned ugly. A moment later, she hid the strange expression on her face and found an excuse to bid farewell to old King Yun and the old princess consort. Although old King Yun and the old princess consort were reluctant to part, they knew that their granddaughter was now carrying a heavy burden on her shoulders, so they could only leave in tears. Chapter 3696 Tower Master Luchen's request for marriage. Little sister Jo, what happened? Yun Jichen felt that something was wrong. He knew this little sister Jo too well. As an emperor, she was a loose cannon. Unless something big had happened, she wouldn't be so anxious to rush back. Yun Chuzhou didn't hide anything, and told him the contents of Prime Minister Sima's voice transmission talisman. What? The pavilion master of the 9 pavilions wants to marry you? What do you plan to do? Yun Jichen did not know whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. Logically speaking, the position of the pavilion master of the 9 pavilions in the northern continent was definitely worthy of Little Ninth Sister. Moreover, Little Ninth Sister was already high up in the hierarchy. However, the problem was that Little Ninth Sister already had someone in her heart. According to the rumors from Prime Minister Sima, their sons were already several years old. Moreover, according to Little Ninth Sister, the hateful palace was a force of the 9 pavilions. The ultimate goal of marrying Little Ninth Sister was probably to control the southern continent. However, if Little Ninth Sister did not agree, the 9 pavilions would not stop like this. They would definitely cause trouble. It was really troublesome. Yun Chuzhou did not answer Yun Jichen because she did not know what to do next. When she thought of the 9 pavilions, she thought of the puppets number 1, number 2, and number 3 that had self-detonated. Her eyes flashed with hatred. Even if she died, She would not marry that ingrate Lan Luochen. Although she had expected that he would not let this matter rest, she did not expect it to come so quickly. According to her estimation, the 9 pavilions would be wary of the other factions in the northern continent and would not make a move within 2 to 3 years. She did not expect Lan Luochen to come up with an excuse to appease the other factions in the northern continent so quickly. Although she was now the female emperor of the towering Sky Empire, the strength of the southern continent was not even worth mentioning when compared to the Lihen Palace. The reason why the Lihen Palace had always taken a roundabout approach was because they were wary of the other factions in the northern continent. Otherwise, they would have already occupied the southern continent by force. Seeing that Yun Chuzhou did not speak, Yun Jichen comforted her, "Little ninth sister, you don't have to worry too much. Even if you don't agree, the 9-layered pavilion is wary of the other factions in the northern continent, so they don't dare to really send troops to attack our southern continent. Moreover, their northern continent's spiritual power will be much weaker when they arrive in our southern continent. Even if they really send troops, they might not be a match for our southern continent." Yun Chuzhou sighed, "Although what you said is right, don't forget that my position as the female emperor is not stable. Although the Yutian Kingdom and the other 8 countries have submitted to us, if the 9-layered pavilion really attacks us, they might very well switch sides at the last minute. At that time, our situation will be worrying. Furthermore, since the 9-layered pavilion would send a letter asking for marriage, it means that they already have an excuse to deal with the other powers in the northern continent. I'm afraid that the other powers might not interfere." When Yun Jichen heard this, he immediately panicked. This wouldn't do either. Could it be that he could only marry Tower Master Luochen? Yun Zichen's eyes suddenly lit up. "Little ninth sister, why don't you send a message to young Master D? Maybe he has a way." Yun Chuzhou smiled bitterly. Before Di Biming left, he had specifically said that the place he went to could not be used with the voice transmission talisman. She could not contact him now. Seeing Yun Chuzhi's bitter smile, Yun Jichen guessed that there was an inside story. He comforted her, "Little sister Jiu, don't be too anxious. You are the most resourceful. You will definitely think of a way. Back then we were threatened by the 3 kingdoms of the South Dragon Kingdom. Later, we were besieged by the 3 kingdoms of the Jingwood Kingdom. Didn't we also rely on borrowed strength to survive? So there must be a way." Chapter 3697. The cat that came up with the idea. Yun Chuzhou laughed bitterly again. "Fifth brother, back then I used the power to fight and even lured the tiger to drive the wolf away. That was because I knew those people's weaknesses. Moreover, my words carried a certain weight with them. But now, even if I go to those forces in the northern continent to discuss the pros and cons, do you think they will listen to me? I'm afraid I won't even be able to meet the leaders of those forces." Yun Jichen didn't know what to say. The southern continent really didn't have any say in the northern continent, even if Yun Chuzhou was the ruler of the towering Sky Empire. For a moment, both of them fell into silence. Yun Chuzhou gritted her teeth. There would always be a way. She had already prepared for the worst. If she really couldn't think of any other way, then she would gather people at the northern continent's borders to prepare to face the enemy. Even if it was possible to face internal and external problems, she would definitely not marry that ingrate Lan Luochen. 7 days later, Yun Chuzhi's flying spiritual device arrived at the imperial capital of the towering Sky Empire. As soon as she returned to the imperial palace, Prime Minister Sima arrived with a worried look on his face. "Your Majesty, Emperor Jinglai and the other 8 emperors have been waiting for you at the courier station for several days. It seems that they have already received the news. It's just that I don't know how they got the news." Yun Chuzhou sneered. "How? It's nothing more than the spies of the hateful palace. When they retreated back then, how could they not hold back? What is their attitude? Your Majesty, they are all inclined to marry you. After all, those people were used to being suppressed by the hateful palace. When they heard the name of the 9 pavilions, their legs turned to jelly," Prime Minister Sima said disdainfully. Yun Chuzhou had long expected this, so she was not too surprised. Internal and external problems were probably what she was talking about. Even so, she still dressed up and went to see Emperor Jinglai and the others. In their conversation, Emperor Jinglai and the others expressed their intentions very clearly. They did not want to go through another war, and had Yun Chuzhou marry obediently. Even if Yun Chuzhou suggested that the 9-storied pavilion's goal in marrying her was to occupy the southern continent, Emperor Jinglai and the others did not change their minds. Yun Chuzhou sneered in her heart. It must be because the 9-layered pavilion had already promised this person that they would brazenly force her out of the palace. It was a pity that she was not fully fledged yet. Otherwise, she would have really taken down all the 8 kingdoms. Yun Chuzhou did not argue with them. She only gave a few perfunctory words with a faint expression before leaving in a hurry. Yun Chuzhou returned to her bedroom and sent the palace maids and guards away. Then, she let out all the silly cuties and asked them to work together to help her think of a solution. Buttface stretched out his little paw and said arrogantly, "Little fairy, you are a scourge. What are you afraid of? Just marry that Chun. You will kill him. You will kill his whole family. Even his dog will be killed. Get lost." Yun Chuzhou kicked the idiot away. She wished she could take a rag and stuff it in its mouth. Meng Yanshou was holding a script that he had not finished reading. He rolled his eyes and said, "Little fairy, why don't you elope? Isn't that what the script says? Get lost too." Yun Chuzhou felt that she had really lost her mind. What kind of stupid idea were these two coming up with? One was more unreliable than the other. The kitten's lowered eyes were filled with schadenfreude. It wished that something bad would happen to Yun Chuzhou. As long as Yun Chuzhou died, it would be free. Moreover, it might even be able to eat those idiots to increase its strength. It rolled its eyes. It had to come up with a bad idea for her. It was best to let her kill herself as soon as possible. Chapter 3698 Cat Cub's Good Idea. Cat Cub said weakly, "Meow master, I have an idea. I don't know if it will work. Even if it doesn't, don't kick me, okay?" Yun Chuzhou nodded. "Speak." "Meow master, with your ability alone, you obviously can't fight against the 9 pavilions. You have to borrow their strength. Who can fight against the 9 pavilions?" The answer was obvious. It was all the major forces in the northern continent. So you only have one way now. That is to join a sect in the northern continent that can go against the 9 pavilions. That way, the 9 pavilions cannot do anything to you for the time being. When your Prince Charming returns, he will definitely have a way to help you escape. By then, won't the problem be solved? Yun Chuzhou did not expect the kitten to come up with any good ideas, not to mention that it was acting suspiciously now. However, when she heard what it said, her heart skipped a beat. She could guess that the kitten's motive was most likely to send her to the northern continent to die. After all, anyone from the northern continent had a higher spiritual power than her. Perhaps she would meet with danger very soon and die. However, she had to admit that this was also a good way to save herself from death. On one hand, if she passed the throne to Yun Jichen, the 9 pavilions would temporarily have no excuse. With this breathing space, the Atlas Empire could sow discord between the other 8 nations. At that time, the attention of the 8 nations would shift to fighting each other. Not only could the Atlas Empire reap the benefits, but they could also secretly increase their strength and slowly annex the other 8 nations. On the other hand, if she could enter a sect that could compete with the 9 pavilions, she could at least delay for a period of time and wait for the pretty boy to return. If she was lucky, she could stir up a pool of stagnant water in the northern continent and take the opportunity to eliminate the 9 pavilions for good. The more Yun Chuzhou thought about it, the more she felt that this was a great idea. She found the kitten more pleasing to the eye, and the death sentence that she had originally given him turned into a suspended death sentence. "Kitten, you've made a great contribution this time. Here, I'll reward you with 2 dried fish." He Xinzhou smiled and handed the kitten 2 dried fish. The kitten wanted to vomit when he saw the dried fish, but he was afraid that he would be exposed, so he said against his will, "Meow, thank you, master. This is what I should do." The kitten said this, but in its heart it gritted its teeth and thought, "Stupid girl, you are really smart for a lifetime. Have you fallen into my trap? You, a weak chicken, still want to enter a big sect in the northern continent." Tui, it's simply wishful thinking. You might just be beaten to death the moment you enter the northern continent. At that time the sky would be high enough for the birds to fly, the sea would be wide enough for the clouds to leap. With this excellent shell, the white tiger would be able to kill in all directions. Meow. The more the kitten thought about it, the happier it felt. However, its heart suddenly sank. Recently, not only did it always say daddy, but why did it always imitate the meow of a cat? The kitten felt a little uneasy in its heart, but it could not tell what exactly it was uneasy about, so it simply threw it to the back of its mind. It was full of fantasies about Yun Chujo dying early so that it could regain its freedom. Yun Chujo worked for a day and 2 nights in a row. She racked her brains and wrote rapidly. It was not until the morning of the 3rd day that she summoned Yoon Jichin and Prime Minister Sima into the imperial study. As soon as they met, Yun Chujo smiled and said to Yoon Jichin, "Fifth brother, I once said that I would help you win the throne. Now it's time to fulfill my promise. You can sit on the throne of the towering Sky Empire." Chapter 3699. Head to the border. Yoon Jichin was so frightened that he sat down on the ground. Your Majesty, what did you say?" Yun Chujo burst into laughter. "Fifth brother, I said, I'll let you sit on the throne. You're too timid. It's not a big deal. Do you have to be so afraid?" Yoon Jichin felt as if 100 divine beasts were roaring in his heart. Wasn't this a big deal? This was the imperial throne of the towering Sky Empire. If this wasn't a big deal, was there anything bigger than this in the world? Seeing that Yoon Jichin was still in a daze, Yoon Chujo smiled and told him her plan. "Fifth brother, this imperial throne is actually a hot potato. It's not easy for me to find someone else, so I can only leave it to you." Yoon Jichin naturally knew that Yoon Chujo said this to let him not have any burdens, but how could he sit on this imperial throne? Yoon Jichin tried all sorts of excuses, but in the end, he reluctantly agreed. However, he forcefully added another condition. That was, once Yoon Chujo settled the 9 pavilions, the throne would be returned to her immediately. Yoon Chujo agreed perfunctorily. In fact, although this fellow liked to show off, he didn't care too much about the position of female emperor. If it weren't for the circumstances, she wouldn't have plotted to sit on the throne step by step. In this fellow's heart, rather than being a tiring female emperor, it would be better to go around and be happy. After Yoon Chujo convinced Yoon Jichin, she took out a stack of papers, on which were written the future development strategies of the Atlas Empire, as well as some emergency countermeasures and so on. Yoon Jichin was very apprehensive. When he saw the contents of these papers, he couldn't help but relax a little. However, in his heart, he felt that his talent was far too inferior to this little 9th sister. Yoon Chujo gave a few more instructions to Prime Minister Sima. The old man's eyes were filled with tears. He really couldn't bear to part with His Majesty. The 3 of them discussed the details. Now they naturally couldn't spread the news of the change in the throne. Otherwise it would be very difficult for Yoon Chujo to cross the border. Yoon Chujo replied to the 9 pavilions with a letter. The gist of it was to say that the matter was important and that they needed to consider it for a period of time before giving an answer. Tower Master Luochin was certain that Yoon Chujo had no way out this time, so he did not force her. He gave her a month's time limit, stating that if she still did not have a definite answer within a month, then the 9-storied pavilion could only come over to welcome the bride. When Yoon Chujo received Lan Luchin's reply, she was so angry that she gritted her teeth. Although she had met many bastards, none of them made her feel so disgusted. Even for Su Yenran, who had repeatedly survived, she did not feel so disgusted. At the end of the day, there was a trace of heartache mixed in with this hatred. Lan Luochin could be considered her friend back then, but how did he become such a hateful person now? After Yoon Chujo received the letter of credence, she immediately had a palace maid who looked a little like her pretend to appear outside with Prime Minister Sima and Yoon Jichin to numb the spies of the 9 pavilions. Yoon Chujo took a disguise pill and blended in with a group of soldiers who were heading to the border, arriving at the border between the northern and southern continents. The border was a no-fly zone within a radius of 100 li, so it was really difficult to blend in. It was easy to deal with the southern continent. Yoon Jichin had already arranged for his trusted aides to secretly send Yoon Chujo out of the southern continent. However, once she entered the northern continent, it would not be so easy. Although the 9 pavilions did not have many soldiers guarding the border, they could still see a few patrolling disciples. Moreover, their spiritual power was quite high. Once Yun Chujo went over, she would definitely be discovered. Chapter 3700. I am a member of the Chaotian sect. The kitten in Yun Chujia's spiritual beast pouch was very pleased when it saw the situation. Meow. This little girl would probably be killed as a spy as soon as she set foot on the northern continent's territory. Ha ha. It was beautiful just thinking about it. However, the kitten's beautiful dream was quickly destroyed because it saw the little girl relying on the dream created by Meng Yanshou to sneak past the defense line of the 9 pavilions. The cat cub was so hateful. This curly hair always complained about how the little girl treated him so badly. However, at the critical moment he still went to help her. What a slut! At this time, Yun Chujo had already passed through the 9 pavilions' defense line. But she did not dare to relax. If Meng Yanshou had not used up almost all of its spiritual power to control the few patrolling disciples, she would have been caught by now. Moreover, although she had passed through the defense line, it was inevitable that there were spies from the 9 pavilions nearby, so it was better to be careful. To be on the safe side, Yun Chujo took a rejuvenation pill and turned into a 13 or 14-year-old. This fellow felt extremely regretful. If only she had that kind of pill that could directly make people unable to tell the gender. If she disguised as a teenager, the insurance factor would be much higher. In the future, when she had time, she would definitely properly fiddle with this formula. When that time came, she would let Curly Hair test the medicine. After all, its shell could be changed at any time. Meng Yanshou, who was currently standing in its spirit beast bag, violently sneezed. Why did it have a very bad premonition? Yun Chujo sped along the way. When she saw that they were about to leave the no-fly zone, she couldn't help but feel delighted. However, she didn't expect that more than 10 disciples of the 9 pavilions would appear in front of them. Yun Chujia's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that these people had already discovered her weakness and had come to intercept her? Who are you? How did you appear at the border of the northern and southern continents? The leader of a small gang questioned sternly. Yun Chujo answered with her head lowered. I am here to pick herbs. I accidentally entered this place. I will leave now. Picking herbs? You look like a spy from the southern continent. Men, take her down. Yun Chujo naturally wouldn't give up. In a moment of desperation, a flash of inspiration appeared in her head. She stomped her feet in exasperation and said, Wait, I'm only 13 years old. Can a person from the southern continent have the spiritual power of the 9th level of the spiritual transformation realm at 13 years old? Hearing that, the leader believed her a little. In their opinion, the people of the southern continent were very useless. It would be very good if they could cultivate to the 4th or 5th layer of the spiritual transformation when they were 13 or 14 years old. Even if you are not a spy of the southern continent, why did you sneak to this border? The leader questioned again. Yun Chujo bit her lips and said as if she had broken a jar, Well, since I've been discovered by you, I can only tell you the truth. I'm from the Chaotian sect. I was originally picking herbs nearby, but I was curious when I saw so many of you, so I came to take a look. I didn't expect to be found out by you when I just arrived. The leader frowned when he heard Yun Chujia's words. People from the Chaotian sect? A second-class sect like the Chaotian sect was respectful to the 9-storied pavilion, but a few months ago, because of that incident, the Chaotian sect became more suspicious of the 9-storied pavilion. Although they didn't dare to express their dissatisfaction openly. However, their relationship didn't become awkward. If this little girl was a member of Chaotian sect, it could explain why she was acting so sneakily. It was likely that she wanted to gather some information and report it back to the sect. Chapter 3701 was fortunate to have the token of Chaotian sect. Seeing the change in the expression of the leader, Yun Chujo raised her voice and said, I know I shouldn't have barged in. I was wrong, all right? Let me go. My senior brother and senior uncle will be very worried if they find out that I'm missing. The leader had been thinking about whether he should kill her to silence her. Now that he heard that there were other people of Chaotian sect nearby, especially the senior uncle mentioned by this little girl was most likely an elder of Chaotian sect. If he really killed this little girl, it would probably cause unnecessary trouble. However, for the sake of safety, the little leader still asked, "What are the names of your senior brother and martial uncle? And what are your names? Show us your identity jade token." Yun Chujo had accompanied Tower Master Luochen on a tour of Chaotian sect back then, so she had a pretty good understanding of the affairs of Chaotian sect. She had casually given 2 names and even brought out the identity jade token she had used back then. The appearance of Chaotian sect's identity jade token could only tell the difference in identity. As for the specific identity information, only Chaotian sect people could use secret methods to check it. Therefore, Yun Chujo was not afraid that the little leader would see any flaws. As expected, the little leader was very calm when he saw Yun Chujo, and he even had an identity jade token as evidence. After warning her a few times, he let her go. The kitten in the spiritual beast bag was so angry that it was about to die. Did that person have a pig's head? He could also believe the lie that the smelly girl made up? How stupid. However, this was just the beginning. This little girl would not live for more than a few days. Very soon she would be dead. After Yun Chujo left the no-fly zone, she summoned a flying spiritual tool, and immediately flew away like a dog. To be on the safe side, this guy changed several flying spiritual artifacts along the way, and his appearance and age kept changing. Hei Shinjo sped along the way. She was not familiar with the northern continent, but she knew the route from the border to Chaotian sect. However, she was afraid that the people of the 9 pavilions would search along this route, therefore, she headed in the opposite direction of Chaotian sect. It had to be said that it was fortunate that this guy was cautious. Otherwise, he might have been caught by the people of the 9 pavilions. This was because after Yun Chujo left, the small leader thought about it and reported it to the higher-ups. Soon news came from the higher-ups, asking him to bring people to catch the little girl and interrogate her. Since the small leader couldn't catch her, the 9 pavilions arranged other people to follow the direction of Chaotian sect to search for her. Hei Shinjo sped along and finally saw a slightly bigger city in front of her. She decided to go down and get some information at least by a map, and then decide where to go next. Therefore, Hei Shinjo landed the flying spiritual device outside the city and swaggered into the city. Someone checked the identity document at the city gate, but this guy still used the identity jade plate of the Chaotian sect to fool her. This guy couldn't help but feel lucky. Fortunately, she had stumbled into Chaotian sect by accident. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so easy to deal with. After Yun Chujo entered the city, she went straight to the bookstore and bought a map of the northern continent and a bunch of books about the common knowledge of the northern continent. Of course, in order not to arouse suspicion, this guy also included some other books and storybooks. After leaving the bookstore, Yun Chujo didn't dare to stay any longer. She just bought some food and left the city in a hurry. After Yun Chujo left, people from the 9 pavilions appeared in the bookstore. After interrogating the owner of the bookstore, they began to search the city. Chapter 3702, 1 Pavilion, 2 Islands, 3 Sects. Yun Chujo flew to a valley and changed to another flying spirit tool. Then she turned around and flew in the opposite direction. This guy mocked himself in his heart. Fortunately, she had prepared a lot of flying spirit tools in order to walk Ray. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been enough for her. Because of this guy's cautiousness, the people of the 9-storied pavilion missed again. However, because of his repeated failures, the news was reported to Tower Master Luochen. Tower Master Luochen had been in a good mood recently. After scheming for so many years, he finally had the chance to be together for a long time. How could he not be happy? His plan this time could be said to be flawless. Previously, he had ordered the entire Lihan Palace to retreat to the northern continent in order to numb Yun Chujo and Di Biming. As expected, Di Biming left once again. Now that Yun Chujo was facing internal and external problems, she had no other choice but to marry him. He knew that even if Yun Chujo married him, She would still be unwilling. But so what? He had plenty of time to change her mind and erase beaming from her heart bit by bit. In the end, both her heart and person would belong to him. However, when Tower Master Luochen heard his subordinate's report, the teacup in his hand immediately fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. He had a feeling that the little girl who had crossed the border was definitely Yun Chujio. She had actually sneaked into the northern continent. What did she want to do? Tower Master Luochen fell back into his chair and stared blankly for a long time. Finally, a flash of understanding appeared in his eyes. If he had guessed correctly, Little Nine was planning to join a faction that could rival the Li Hen Palace. He had truly underestimated her. However, her thoughts were a bit too simple. Even if she was talented, her spiritual power was truly too low. What's more, the sects of the northern continent were not the same as those of the lower continents. The sects of the other continents would regularly open their gates to accept disciples, and they generally preferred to accept younger disciples. This way, it would be more conducive to cultivating loyalty to the sect, and it would also allow them to dig out good seedlings. The second-class sects of the northern continent and those unrated sects were also like this, but the first-class sects were not like this. These large sects had existed for tens of thousands of years, and they had enough resources to attract outstanding talents. Therefore, they did not need to expend any effort to fight for disciples, nor did they need to expend manpower and material resources to organize a large-scale disciple recruitment ceremony. If one wanted to join such a large-scale sect, one had to either rely on the recommendation of the sect's elders, or rely on the recommendation of other mighty figures in the northern continent. Of course, the descendants of the sect were blessed by the heavens, and basically all of them were able to successfully join the sect. Yun Chujio, who was neither recommended nor the descendant of a member of the sect, had extremely stringent requirements to enter a large sect. She simply couldn't enter. Thinking of this, a cold smile appeared on Tower Master Luchen's face. It was better to let her hit the wall, or else she would really think that she was omnipotent. You guys go and stand guard near the three great sections. You will definitely gain something. However, be careful when you make your move. Don't offend the three great section. Yes. At the same time, He Shinjo flipped through the relevant content. The large forces in the northern continent summed up 1 pavilion, 2 islands and 3 section. The first pavilion referred to the 9 pavilions, and the second island referred to the Flying Flower Island and Ascension Island. The 3 sects were the Nameless Sword Sect, the Xuanwu Sect, and the Xuanji Sect. There was no need to consider the second island because the first prerequisite for the 2 islands to recruit disciples was the Water Spirit route. If one's aptitude was good enough, the Wood Spirit route would be passable, and He Shinjo would be useless. As for which of the remaining 3 sects to choose, He Shinjo had yet to decide. Chapter 3703, Nameless Sword Sect. Of course, Yun Chujio also saw that the way the 3 great sects recruited disciples was not quite the same as what she had known in the past. After complaining a little, she decided to give it a try, because she had no other choice now. Other than having someone recommend her or the descendants of the people in the sect, there was another way to join the 3 great sects, and that was to barge in. Of course, this barge was not to barge into other people's sections. Instead, the 3 great sects and the 2 islands all had special trial passages. If the challenger could pass all the trials, then he could become a disciple of the sect. As for whether he was a handyman or an outer sect disciple, that would depend on the sect's decision. If one thought that many people would go to the trial passage, then they would be gravely mistaken. Not only were the trials set up in the trial passageway treacherous and unpredictable, but they were also very dangerous. Many people would lose their lives in the first trial, and even if they died, they would die. The other sects would not care about them at all. Therefore, in the beginning, there were still people who were unwilling to attempt the trial passageway. However, tens of thousands of years had passed, and there were very few people who could pass through the trial passageway. This method of entering a sect was practically not mentioned anymore. Instead of risking her life to pass through the trial passageway, it was better to use her connections and find someone to recommend or marry an elder or disciple in the sect. Even being a concubine was a good idea. He Shinjo sighed. If it wasn't for the fact that time was pressing, she would have preferred to use her connections. With her eloquence and money, she should be able to befriend people from the three great sections. However, now that time was not allowed, she could only take the risk and go through the trial passageway. There was another reason why this fellow dared to try her luck. It was because when this fellow set off, Mao Maocho told her that the Great Void Mirror had already recovered a little, and that she could enter and hide at the critical moment. Yun Chujo studied the information of the three great sects again, and finally decided to go to the Nameless Sword Sect. The reason why she chose the Nameless Sword Sect was firstly because the Nameless Sword Sect was the closest to her. Secondly, this fellow had already grasped the sword intent of chaos. This could be considered as having some talent in practicing the sword, right? Yun Chujo made up her mind and sped toward the Nameless Sword Sect. When this fellow had left the capital of the Towering Sky Empire, he had already purchased a lot of things like chili noodles. Thus, he didn't go to the nearby towns to purchase them, and directly went outside the Nameless Sword Sect's sect. Yun Chujo had already recovered her original appearance on the flying spiritual artifact. This way she wouldn't expose herself and cause unnecessary trouble in the future. Secondly, she did this to shut up the 9 pavilions in the future. This proved that she really had nothing to do with the Towering Sky Empire now. The mountain gate of the Nameless Sword Sect was quite different from what Yun Chujo had thought. She had thought that the mountain gate of a large sect like the Nameless Sword Sect would have a magnificent cultivation style. At the very least, it should be stronger than the Chaotian sect. However, the mountain gate in front of her couldn't be any more ordinary. If people didn't know about it, they would think that it was a small and unrated sect. Yun Chujo looked at the map and then looked at the plaque on the sect. Only then did she confirm that she didn't go to the wrong place. When Yun Chujo was looking around, the disciples guarding the gate noticed her. One of them shouted sternly, "This is the Nameless Sword Sect. People who don't belong here cannot stay here. Hurry up and leave." Yun Chujo quickly said, "I'm here to enter the sect." The attitude of the disciple who spoke immediately softened. "Oh, join the sect? Then who recommended you? Did you bring a recommendation letter?" Chapter 3704 The Road to Heaven. Well, I wasn't recommended by someone else. Yun Chujo laughed dryly. You weren't recommended by someone else? Then you're a relative of an elder in our sect? Or are you someone's wife and concubine? When the disciple said the last sentence, there was a hint of gossip in his eyes. Yun Chujo was silent for a moment, and then she said word by word, "Neither. I want to challenge your sect's trial passage." "What? You want to challenge the 9-to-1 life path to heaven? Are you crazy?" The disciple exclaimed while looking at Yun Chujo as if she was a lunatic. The names of the trial passages of the 3 great sects and the 2 islands were different. The trial passage of the Nameless Sword Sect was called the 9-to-1 life path to heaven. It was a 9-to-1 life path to heaven, and it was also the path to heaven. One could imagine how dangerous it was. Yun Chujo repeated again, "That's right, I want to challenge the 9 deaths, 1 life and the road to heaven." "Excuse me, where is the entrance of the 9 deaths, 1 life and the road to heaven?" As soon as Yun Chujo's words came out, the gatekeeping disciples all looked at her in disbelief. A little girl at the 9th level of the spirit transformation realm actually dared to boast shamelessly that she wanted to challenge the 9 deaths, 1 life, and the road to heaven? Either her brain wasn't working, or she was thinking too simply. One of the disciples who looked honest couldn't bear for Yun Chujo to die just like that. He said, "Little girl, this 9-to-1 life path to ascend to heaven isn't a joke. Not to mention the distant one, in the past 100 years, there was only one person who succeeded. Those who didn't pass all died inside. So you should go back." Yun Chujo bowed to the disciple. "Thank you, big brother, but I have a reason to break in. Please tell me where the entrance is." The disciple who looked honest wanted to persuade her again, but the disciple who spoke first said harshly, "It's hard to persuade a damn ghost with words. Since she wants to die, then let her go." The honest-looking disciple had no choice but to stop talking after hearing that. He pointed at a cave beside the mountain gate that was covered in weeds and said, "Do you see that? Behind the weeds is the entrance of the road to heaven. Little girl, it's not too late for you to go back on your words. Once you enter the road to heaven, there's no turning back. You have to think twice. Yun Chujo thanked the disciple sincerely, and then walked to the cave that was already covered in weeds. Yun Chujo could tell that the disciple was telling the truth when she saw the weeds. The weeds had grown so luxuriously, it must have been a long time since anyone had entered. She took a deep breath, then pushed aside the dense weeds and walked in. The disciple who spoke harshly shook his head. This little girl is not bad looking, but her brain is not very good. She is dead for sure. The disciple who faced the loyal disciple sighed. He also felt that Yun Chujo basically could not survive. He said hesitantly, "Do we need to report this matter to the higher-ups?" "Report what? That little girl definitely can't pass, so why bother looking for trouble? When the time comes, they will be asking all sorts of questions, so I can't be bothered to get into trouble. Mujiang, you are not allowed to go either, do you hear me?" That loyal disciple, that was Mujiang, helplessly nodded his head. Actually, it didn't matter whether she reported it or not because that little girl simply couldn't pass. Not to mention that she was only at the 9th level of the spirit transformation realm. Even the 9th level of spiritual connection realm might not be able to pass. Therefore, the moment she entered the cave, there was basically no hope of survival. Chapter 3705 was not as simple as she had imagined. Yun Chujo had initially thought that entering the cave would mean entering the 9-to-1 life heavenly path. She had not expected that after entering the cave for a short while, her vision would suddenly brighten. There was actually another world inside. There was a rippling barrier in front of Yun Chujo. She could vaguely see that there were stone steps that went up one step at a time. It was estimated that only entering this barrier would be the true 9-to-1 life heavenly path. Yun Chujo was just about to enter when the kitten's humming voice came from her spiritual sense. "Master, this slim chance of survival is too dangerous. You better think of another way." Yun Chujo sneered in her heart. She knew why the kitten wanted to stop her. It was just afraid that after she died in here it wouldn't be able to get out. Although Yun Chujo thought so in her heart, she said to the kitten, "Now there's no other way. I can only try. But if I really die, I'll really let you guys down. After all, you guys will probably be trapped in there forever." Yun Chujo's words were like a knife stabbing the kitten's heart. The kitten said a few words that went against its heart, such as share life and death, and die without complaint. And it felt like it was cursing a dog in its heart. Fuck, if this little girl really died in this narrow escape, would it be considered as digging a hole to bury itself? Yun Chujo took a deep breath and stepped into the ripples. The scenery in front of her instantly turned into countless stone steps. Yun Chujo had already participated in countless tests of all sizes, so she was no longer familiar with the path of the steps. She calculated in her heart that this step was nothing more than a test of a person's willpower. She could just climb up. However, things were not what she had expected. After climbing up for a while, she turned around and found that all the stairs had disappeared except for the one under her feet. What was below her was a bottomless abyss. If an ordinary person saw such a situation, they would definitely be shocked. They might even fall down from the stairs directly. Once they fell down, they would most likely lose their lives. Hei Shinjo, on the other hand, clicked her tongue in wonder with great interest. "Yo, this is interesting. This design is not bad. If I can learn this array, will I be able to build a pavilion in the sky in the future? Just thinking about it makes me feel awesome." The kitten in the spiritual beast bag was so angry that it almost cried. What time was it now? This stupid girl was still thinking about such nonsense. It's over. This time it must have really backfired. I'm afraid I'm going to die in here. In order to test whether the steps below were really gone, Hei Shinjo took out a rolling pin and poked at the bottom. When she realized that there was really nothing, she became even more interested in this array formation. Therefore, every step this guy took, he would look back. As expected, all the steps he had taken had disappeared. The guy was playing as he walked, skipping forward. The guy muttered to himself, "That's weird. Is the stone steps just a test of one's courage? Isn't it too much of a waste of talent? How can such a thing be called a narrow escape? While the guy was mumbling, the steps in front of him started to disappear every now and then. In other words, Heishinjo had to jump to get there. This guy was originally jumping, so he did not care about it at all. He continued to jump lightly. It had to be said that only this guy could remain calm at this moment. If it was anyone else, they would have to overcome their fear with every jump, because once they stepped on air they would fall down. There was also a ban on flying here. Once they fell down, there was a high chance that they would die. Chapter 3706. The missing stone steps. The gap on the stone steps became bigger and bigger. At first, Yun Chujo could jump over it without using her spiritual power, but later on, she could only reach the nearest stone steps with the help of her spiritual power. Yun Chujia's originally relaxed expression also became serious. Fortunately, although her spiritual power was not high, her movements were light enough. Otherwise, she would have fallen into the abyss long ago. However, when she saw the 1,000 zhang gap in front of her, she was so angry that she almost swore. Was this a freaking test? Was this a test bird? How could a person jump so far? It would be fine if there was a borrowing point in the middle, but there was no borrowing point in the middle, so how could she jump over? Just as Yun Chujo was thinking about how to jump over, the steps under her feet began to shake. It was obvious that she was going to disappear. Yun Chujo broke out in a cold sweat for the first time. Her brain was working quickly. What should she do? If she wanted to go over, she had to have a borrowing point in the middle. How could she have a borrowing point? The shaking of the stairs became more and more intense. Half of them had already disappeared. Only half of Yun Chujia's feet were on the stairs. Just before the stairs completely disappeared, Yun Chujio suddenly jumped forward. When she reached the middle, her body could not help but fall down. Yun Chujio raised her hand and a few sticky threads attached themselves to the opposite stairs. Yun Chujio used the force to climb to the top of the stairs. Before she could let out a sigh of relief, the stairs began to shake. Yun Chujio could only jump up again. Fortunately, this time the distance was not too far. Following that, Yun Chujio used the sticky threads to jump continuously on the stairs that were getting larger and larger. This guy was so tired that he was panting heavily. She finally understood why many people died in this place. It was really freaky. If she did not have the sticky silk, she would have fallen down by now. However, even if she had the sticky silk, the prospects were not very optimistic. Because the stone steps seemed to have no end. Even with her freakish physical strength, she felt a little powerless. Moreover, she had to concentrate every moment and be tense at all times. It was really too difficult to endure. When she was jumping just now, Heishinjo was slightly distracted. If she had not thrown another sticky thread out of desperation, she might have already fallen down. It was not a good idea to continue like this. Sooner or later, she would be exhausted and fall down. Yun Chujio knew that the fastest way was to find the flaw in this array formation. That way, she would be able to easily pass this round. However, this fellow was not good at array formations. There was no way to break the array formation. This fellow stared at the stone steps surrounded by clouds and mist. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind. Surrounded by clouds and mist? Since these clouds could float in the air, could her little Wu Yun also do it? Thinking of this fellow summoned little Wu Yun. Of course, this fellow was afraid that the chicken would fly and the egg would be smashed. He tied a sticky thread on the little Wu Yun to prevent it from falling down. What made this fellow ecstatic was that the little Wu Yun was floating around in the air, and there was nothing wrong with it. She tried to put one of her feet on it, but there was nothing unusual. Only then did she carefully put both of her feet on it. There was still no problem at all. This fellow's heart was instantly filled with joy. Haha, awesome! When this formation was designed, in order to increase the mysterious effect, it deliberately set up the clouds and mist. It was simply designed specifically for her. Originally, this fellow had been planning to fly up on the little Wu Yun. However, she discovered that only when her feet stepped on the steps would the steps above appear. Thus, this fellow could only treat the little Wu Yun as a ferry boat, shuttling between the steps continuously. Chapter 3707. The Supreme Immortal Palace. Hei Shinjo did not forget to eat and drink to replenish her strength when she was riding the little Wu Yun ferry. This fellow felt that this little Wu Yun was really worth it. This fellow silently made up his mind. When Wu Yun attacked her again, he would at least catch a few more little Wu Yun. After another half a day, they finally reached the end of the stairs. Yun Chujo kept the little dark clouds and blinked her eyes as she looked at the scene in front of her. Was this the Immortal Palace? Amidst the clouds and mist, there was a beautiful palace. Even the most picky person would be impressed by the beauty of this palace. In the sky above the palace, there were still snow-white cranes circling in the sky. All kinds of strange flowers and plants were blooming, and there was even a pleasant immortal sound. Hei Shinjo looked around. The stairs and the cliff behind her had disappeared. She had no other choice but to enter the magnificent palace. As soon as Yun Chujo pushed open the palace door, she heard an orderly greeting. "Welcome, fairy. You are the master of the Supreme Immortal Palace from now on. Your servants will do whatever you ask." Yun Chujo focused her eyes and saw dozens of beautiful palace maids and handsome guards kneeling on the ground, waiting for her orders with an extremely pious attitude. If it were an ordinary person, they would definitely be elated when they saw such a scene. After all, they had never enjoyed such a scene of stars supporting the moon before. In particular, these palace maids were all very beautiful, and the guards were all very handsome. It was inevitable that some people would be shaken, and they might even forget who they were for a moment. However, Hei Shinjo was different. This fellow was the ancestor and the female emperor. He had done things that were more impressive than this, so naturally, he did not take these so-called dazzling and charming eyes seriously. Not to mention those handsome guards were like puppets wearing painted skin. They were just superficial. Cough cough, they were far inferior to her pretty boy. Therefore, Hei Shinjo waved her hand calmly. "Get up. I'm hungry. Roast that flying crane for me and have a taste." The palace maid, the guard. In the past tens of thousands of years, countless people had challenged the trial, but this was the first time that someone wanted to eat a crane? Was this the reincarnation of a starving ghost? Palace master. There are many delicacies in the Supreme Immortal Palace. The meat of this crane is actually not very delicious, a palace maid said with a stiff face. Hei Xinjia's small face darkened immediately. "How dare you? Are you the palace master or am I the palace master? If I tell you to go and catch it, then hurry up and catch it. If you continue to talk nonsense, I'll grill you." The palace maid was so scared that she shivered and didn't dare to say anything more. She quickly took her people to catch the crane. Hei Shinjo looked at the blooming flowers and plants and said to the remaining palace maids and guards, "What's the use of raising these broken flowers that only look good? Pull them all out." "Palace master, if you pull them out they will become bald." "No, it's not very beautiful, is it?" A palace maid braced herself and said, "Are you stupid? After you pluck the flowers and plants, can't you grow some cabbage and radishes? By the way, grow some spiritual potatoes, which can be used to stew the crane meat." Although the palace maids and guards were mad, they didn't dare to object. They went to pluck the flowers and plant the spiritual potatoes with stiff faces. Hei Shinjo walked into the Immortal Palace accompanied by two palace maids. The interior of the Immortal Palace was extremely luxurious. Every detail was filled with immortal chi. Even Hei Shinjo, who was heartless, felt that it was not bad to be able to stay here for a few days. You're tuning into the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.